What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel, and alongside two Blues, aka Jaime and Big Blue. Big Blue, how you doing? We'll start off with the originator.
I'm doing good. I'm doing good, man. Just had to work last night, so I'm trying to get some rest earlier to have to work again tonight.
Dang, man, pulling some grinding there, my man.
Yeah.
Good for you though, man. Get the money coming in.
Right.
How you doing?
Good man. Just again the heat. 113, baby. 113.
Dang, dude, I don't know how you do it out there in that in 113-degree weather.
I kind of know what Jaime feels like now, man, because the AC in my van went out, and I know how it feels now when you're in the warehouse.
Dude, my truck AC just went out day for yesterday. So
Jeez.
that's fun.
Yeah.
That's fun.
It sucks, man.
Well,
Gotta keep hydrated.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, vehicle problems aside, we got a couple of guests for today's show. We're going to be talking a little bit of true crime. We're going to be talking a little bit of Idaho with Melissa Jade and Shay. How you guys doing? We'll start off with you, Melissa. How you doing, Melissa?
I'm good. How are you guys doing? Thank you for having us on.
Oh, we're doing pretty good. Not too bad. And Shay, how about yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Just trying to beat the Texas heat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it gets pretty hot out of here. What do you call it? Like, I was watching remember, Jaime, I sent you an article that there was this thing going on, and no offense to anybody out there in the Pennsylvania area, but there was like a concert. Yeah, in the Pittsburgh area.
Yeah.
Wasn't there like a concert, and there was a couple of concert goers that
heat stroke or something like that.
They had some heat related injuries.
Yeah.
The high of 79.
I think it was 72, man.
I was like, man, it's 115 out here.
Those are rookie numbers.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right.
I laughed because I was at my aunt's funeral, and they were the mariachis, right? It's 110 degrees out there, and
Ooh.
I mean, she got buried next to a tree, so it was a little bit of shade, and they had a tent up. But the mariachis were in full suit, man. Full suit singing out there, and I felt bad. Like, we kept bringing them waters because they were out there for at least an hour in 110-degree heat, man. So
that's crazy.
I saw a video today of an Amazon driver who literally collapsed while delivering packages, and an elderly lady had to feed him watermelon, pour water over his head, and then finally bring him in. It was crazy.
Yeah. Jeez.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been getting kind of crazy. It was kind of, I guess, a mild winter out here. It wasn't too bad. And I was a little bit concerned. I was like, man, it didn't get too cold. I was hoping it wouldn't get that hot this summer, but it sure did. So, Melissa, how did you start your channel? Like, were you always interested in true crime? Is that how you got started in YouTube?
Yeah, I did a mixture of really unsolved true crime. It's the unsolved that really always piqued my interest, with conspiracy, alien, that type of stuff. And so I've always just bounced around. I really didn't focus too much on active cases because, like I said, I preferred the unsolved, bizarre, something not adding up, but I'll stumble upon the active cases when I see that similarity in them.
Oh, nice. And Shay, are you guys like I know you guys are on each other's or on Melissa's channel often. Are y'all guys? Is that y'all's channel together, or is just a guest often?
I panel with Melissa. It's her channel. I mod for her, and she welcomes us mods up anytime we want to talk cases. So I followed Idaho for
during Idaho.
Awesome. Hello, everybody in the live chat and members. Anna P comes in with a $4.99 super chat. Says, we're all fighting for it. Have you heard about Paula Thomason cold case in South Carolina? Eerily similar to LISK. I'd love to know when RH was in South Carolina. Are you guys familiar with that? Are you guys covering the LISK?
Mm-hmm.
So are you familiar with Paula Thomason?
I'm actually not, no.
I haven't heard of this case either.
Yeah, me neither. But
how do y'all feel about Rex Huberman's case? He's been pretty emphatic that he didn't commit the crime either. Do y'all How do y'all feel about that case, especially compared to Bryan Kohberger's case? Which one of those two do you feel is a stronger one? And we'll start off with you, Melissa, and then we'll go to you, Shay.
Stronger based on what we know so far, I would definitely go with Rex. They had a lot longer to build evidence, even though it wasn't evidence built necessarily against him. It's still evidence that's collected over a long period of time. But that's just based off what we know publicly. Like we may turn around with Idaho and they may have a slam dunk. We just don't know that yet. But just based off what we have publicly, I would definitely say the Long Island serial killer.
Got you. And Shay, what about you? Where do you stand on those two cases?
I agree with Melissa. I mean, I feel like that Lisk and what work that they've been able to do on it thus far has a lot more evidence that's gearing to we can see as the public that is Rex. But I also feel like there could be equally just as much over in Bryan Kohberger's case that we just haven't seen yet, that they're going to keep quiet, being how much of a hot topic, media buzz it is. But I do believe that there is quite a bit on list that's more available to the public and seems more solidified at this point.
So who do you think is handling their situation better? New York? I think it's New York, right? Or is it? Yeah, New York
it's Long Island, Nassau County, yeah.
Yeah, or Idaho. One being very much more strict as far as with the gag order in Idaho, not putting out a lot of information, in my opinion, has allowed a lot of speculation and misinformation to go out there. We're not seeing a lot of that when it comes to Lisk. Which one do you think is the better option in y'all's opinion? And I also want to get Blue and Jaime's opinion on it as well, but we'll start off in a circle here with Melissa and then Shay.
What's the better option?
Or which one do you think is handling it better? Or if you were in their shoes, which route would you go?
See, they're two totally different cases. And so I don't think it's fair to necessarily say which one's handling it better, because two different scenarios, you can't really determine which one is better, so to speak. But with the Idaho, it's so popular, and I'm not saying the Long Island serial killer isn't, but as far as the conspiracy theories and the rumor mill versus with the Long Island serial killer, we don't have that. And so I feel like if you're going to compare them, they're not comparable unless they had very similar circumstances surrounding it. So it's not so much like which one's being handled better versus do I think one's not being handled as it should be. And, I don't think I could say either or so far.
Gotcha. What about you, Shay?
Well, I don't think that the Long Island serial killer case was handled well to begin with. That's just given the prior leadership in their ranks in the police department. I mean, that's kind of well known and is what has gotten to where we are now, where you have new leadership that's brought in the FBI and has been able to discover the connections that I think everybody's been hoping for answers and justice for. But I think probably if I think somebody who's handling it better, man, it's so hard. I think Idaho.
But let me put it this way: do you think that Idaho? Okay, so all right, so you think that Idaho is doing it better? You prefer the route of going with less information. Big Blue and Jaime, we'll go with you, Big Blue. Which one do you think you would do if you were in Idaho? Would you continue to keep it as a secret as possible, or would you let out some information, loosen up the ring, so to speak, just so that there can be a little bit of a lid on some of the speculation and misinformation that's going out there? We'll start off with you, Big Blue.
Yeah, I think they can let out a little bit more information to stop all the rumors going around. But I think they also have to keep a lot of the information private to be able to give him a fair trial as what they're trying to do. But like they said in the Rex Zimmerman case, they got all the information out there. Will he get a fair trial? And that I think they got more evidence showing that it's him, that he did it. So On Bryan, there's a little bit of speculation. The only thing they found was DNA, and then everything else puts him there, but not in the house yet. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Not till we get more camera footage, not till where we get more. Maybe one of the cameras actually shows them parked in front of the house, and I mean that we don't have evidence of it yet. So
Right.
I think if any of them are doing a little bit better, I would say probably they both had the FBI had to help them, so I guess they both didn't do the best job.
You don't trust the FBI. We get it, Blue. What about you, Jaime?
What about me?
What do you think, man? Would you, if you were in Idaho, if you were in charge of that case, would you release some information, keep it as close, quiet? And I also want a follow-up question. In the Rex Humerman case, do you think he's going to get a fair trial based on the information that's being spilled out about the case?
Or well, when it comes down to Idaho, um, I think they're going by the book, man. I think if I was in that situation too, um, I wouldn't want so much information out there, especially like the difference between this case in Idaho and Rex is the fact that Rex, I mean, it was years upon years, right?
Mhm.
Before these cases came up to light, and then they got, DNA, and then they made an arrest. So when you ask also that which one was doing it better, in this case, it will be Idaho just for the fact that it took so long to get evidence against Rex, right?
Right. Well, that or perhaps Moscow conceded faster because the only way they got Bryan Kohberger was because of the genetic tree. And the only
Mhm.
way that they could have gotten the genetic tree is if they went to the FBI and said that they have exhausted all of their, regular law enforcement tactics to find a suspect and have no lead. Right. So they
Yeah.
conceded to that fact faster, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
No, exactly that, and that's why I'm saying that the Idaho did it a little bit faster. I
That's
mean,
true.
look how
They
long.
did.
So I think they handled that a little bit, handled that right, considering that it took so long for Rex to even get pointed out. You know what I mean? Arrested. And,
That's
I'm
true.
sorry, I forgot your other one, the second part.
Do you think Rex Humerman gets a fair trial?
Yeah, I do. Even though there's more transparency in that case,
Uh-huh.
considering that in Idaho has the gag order. I think he will. I think there's more than enough evidence to even you know to convict.
Right, right. So, Melissa, in your opinion, with all the misinformation that's out there, and or information and misinformation that's out there in the Idaho 4 case, which would you think is better? Going into trial, a um, perhaps a lot of misinformation that's out there, and maybe some opinions might be in the wrong way, but there's the opportunity of the proof coming out in this in court. See, I'm trying to word this, but I think I'm wording it wrong. So going into trial,
Mhm.
which would you prefer? Would you prefer that the court of public opinion that Bryan Kohberger be innocent or guilty? Because I know that there's a lot of people that are thinking one way or another, and it seems like there's a strong emotional tie to either side. Right? A
Mhm.
lot of folks are like, "Oh yeah, this guy's either dead guilty or this guy's either 100% innocent."
Yep.
And I think that although there's some misinformation out there that could allude to reasonable doubt now, I think that that's probably in the best interest of the trial versus going in to trial with a lot of the information out there where Bryan Kohberger is already, presumed guilty. What are your opinions on that? I hope I asked
So
the
I think
question
what you're
properly.
asking is, would I rather too much information? Some could be misinformation, some could be accurate, but we won't know till trial, going into trial, like as if I was a juror, or would I rather nothing and going in without really having any idea? Is that what you're asking?
No, no, no. So would you rather have like it be as sealed as it is, but a lot of misinformation, and going into trial, there's a lot of conversation that Bryan Kohberger could be innocent? Or would you rather have that, like right now, nobody thinks Rex Humerman is innocent?
I mean, I think it's a double-ended sword, right? It's the lack of them, it's this gag order that's really fueling a lot of the misinformation, and it leaves a lot of room for people to fill in the holes themselves, which is dangerous. It's doing a lot of damage, in my opinion. But even if they turned around at this point and released things, I don't think people would accept that either, and that's why it's like, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think I'm pretty open-minded to where I could remain unbiased, but that's a hard question. Like, it's a really hard question.
I guess the better question would be, what's more damning, before trial, misinformation that's out there for the prosecution, because it's misinformation that's trying to create reasonable doubt, or, correct information that is creating a sense of no fair trial for Bryan Kohberger.
Misinformation.
So, yeah, me too. I think that if there's misinformation come time to trial, that can be overtaken once the true evidence and proof. And I think that when we look at the fact that Latah County isn't releasing anything, and they're not, releasing the gag order, might be because they're okay with misinformation being out there right now.
I think they are actually encouraging misinformation being out there.
Yeah. You might absolutely be right. I mean, I think they want. I think because misinformation perhaps could create more of an unbiased jury pool if they don't know the true information that's relevant to the case. Shay, right now, currently, where this case stands, where are you at on your thoughts on Bryan Kohberger possibly being the person that committed this crime, or are you more on the side where I think there's enough information that's out there that makes me question it enough that I don't think he did it, and not guilty or innocent. I'm talking about just did it.
I mean, at this point, I think that he has some involvement in it. I go back to, like, everything is circumstantial evidence at this point. Like, we don't have him on video that we know of committing the crime itself. So, to our knowledge, everything is circumstantial evidence. So, I feel like he very plausibly could have done this. The only thing that I feel that gives me like a little bit of a hold up, like coming to court, is gonna. I know Anna's a really, really good lawyer, and I am really nervous on when she is going after the officers' training and their abilities and what that they've put in the PCA, and who has been the person to do the analysis of that. That is what makes me nervous. So he could have done everything, but if we didn't have the right people reviewing, signing off on paperwork, that's what technicalities make me nervous on this, just to be honest. But I do think it is plausible that he did it, and I don't think that he has to actually know the victims to do it.
When it comes to Bryan Kohberger, I personally think that the guy did it, and I think he did it on his own, honestly. And we'll go into further more of that information, but I do. Now, whether or not they're going to be able to hook him for the case, that's a different story. There are some things, like, for instance, like, one of the hurdles that I have when it comes to this case is the warrant for his historical data for his locations. It goes based off of his education, and I think it goes also based off the fact that his phone was not connected to a tower during the time of the crime. I'm not sure if that's enough to pin him to take away his rights. Now, I don't see, I haven't seen Ann Taylor argue that to try to throw out that piece of evidence out of court, but I'm not sure if they're at that part of trial yet. I'm not an attorney. Do you guys know more or less, like, if they, this is the time when attorneys would be trying to exclude or throw out evidence?
Yeah, this is the time.
And so the fact that they're not means that it's probably good, right? I would assume.
Well, we have the hearing coming up soon, so that hearing could, sway the judge one way or another. But yeah, I do believe like this is the time where what is in discovery will be thrown out. There's a lot that even in recent cases that like I've followed. For example, Alyssa Turney, I was a big advocate for her case finally going to court, and her sister actually testified against her father, and there's a lot to that case that was left out, determined by the judge and the lawyers that I felt like was very pertinent to get to where they were in their court case, and eventually it was overturned and he can't be tried again, her father. So yeah, like going up through this process before court date starts, it's going to be where they're looking at what kind of evidence will be brought in. And then once that has been determined, they if if they do try to bring that in, then the judge would ultimately ask the jury to leave, determine to what point that has been contaminated to the jury. They could call a mistrial. I mean, there's so many things that could happen here. Like
Right.
like this is the time right now that I feel like is the most important. So seeing the amount of like documents going back and forth from objections to state responses, like it is very peril. And I think for a lot of people, they've never like read these documents before, so they don't know how to like determine that it's part of a natural court case to go through this process. But it's also, I feel like, highly charged and emotional because there's so much there that us like as viewers and advocates for wanting like justice, like we just don't get to see everything. Like we're only seeing what we're allowed to in these documents. So the actual material evidence we haven't seen.
Right. No, 100%. Anna P comes in with a $4.99 super chat. Amber Heard and Kyle Rittenhouse trials is a great example of why public opinion doesn't really matter when evidence is presented. Thank you so much, Tuesday, with your $50 super chat. We appreciate you. Jordan with a $1.99 super chat.
Thank you.
Happy Monday. And UTs comes on with a $5 super chat. Some of my favorite P's. Thank you so much. Or it's not UTs, Nez T. I'm sorry. Nez T. I'm bad at pronouncing names. I mean, should we need to talk about the whole Kim Pam situation?
That's a perfect example.
You started a whole conspiracy with that.
Oh, I know. It was horrible.
I actually saw a TikTok video about that, like breaking down all the different names that you gave her.
It's like picking them out of a hat and shit.
I just, it just happens. I'm just glad that I haven't said the right name for some people. Like, for instance, like Dave. Like, I haven't accidentally said his correct name out there. And so that one is the one that worries me. That's why I've tried to forget that one. But that I started a whole conspiracy on. When it comes to Bryan Kohberger and the Kohberger case, when did you guys start getting involved in the case? Was it like right when it happened? Was it a little bit afterwards? Y'all got started then, right after it happened?
I think it was like 2-3 days after first hit. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Same.
Did y'all have any idea of who may have been the person prior to the arrest of Bryan Kohberger?
I always thought it was going to be nobody in the spotlight. All the people that they cycled through, all those names, I said it's going to be somebody that we haven't heard their name. It's going to be someone close who doesn't live in the town, but it's familiar with the town. But it's going to be a name that when they actually arrest him, it's going to be the first time we heard it. So I never went through all of the people of the list. I never thought it was, because it was the main group of people. And so if they had involvement, I think that they would have made an arrest already. And so I just always thought it was somebody else. And I don't know about Shay. What do you think?
Oh, shoot. I went through them all. Like, I mean, this is where I think you learn, from your speculation and what, it can go through. So, yeah, I mean, I was interested in learning like who all the people were that could be connected to the case or the victims themselves. But right after I got, right after we had word about Bryan, like I did think it was somebody that wasn't going to be connected at the end of it. I was kind of like, it didn't feel like that. I did think it was going to be somebody a little bit older. I didn't really go for the incel thing as near as much, but maybe somebody who's a little bit awkward and different. And then by the time Bryan was like named as the person, then I let everything else go. But I have the natural questions like everyone else does in the documents and like materials that like we all read the PCA. I mean, I think for one, like I was completely floored by the change of time. That was like one of the biggest ones for me that Dylan had seen. Because we were told it was like between 3 and 4, and then this after 4 mark.
You know why police officers do that, right?
Why?
Because only the real suspect would have known what time it was. So they put out a time that's wrong. So that way, if somebody comes out and forward and says that they committed this crime, and they say, "All right, what time did it happen?" 3:45. All right, you're just trying for clout. Get the hell out of here. So, it's a trick. It's a tactic.
Okay, well, I was shocked by that. I was like, huh.
It bothered me, along with them saying that both surviving roommates were originally on the first floor asleep. And then we found out, no, actually, Dylan was on the second floor and was an eyewitness. Yet I was able to make sense of that because I thought maybe they didn't want the killer to know that there was somebody who could eyewitness and ID them potentially. But with that, with the sketchiness with the 911 call and with what Jay was saying collectively, it was like, why are things being so inconsistent? Why are things changing? And also the timeline with Ethan and Xana, they weren't able I don't know if you remember in the beginning, it was like, where were they during these hours? And it was a piece of the timeline that was missing. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh no, they were there at the party the entire time. So it was just weird how it all unfolded.
Yeah, and the DoorDash driver was huge too. I had no idea about the DoorDash driver until that PCA, and my jaw hit the floor. I was like, whoa, like, is that a witness? Like, who is this person?
So we have a question here. I kind of want to ask everybody. I'll start off with Jaime and Blue. Do you guys think that BK is going to be silent the entire trial? Do you think he's going to talk? We'll start off with you, Jaime.
Nah, I think he's going to stay quiet. I think that's the best thing he could do. I think that's what the lawyers are going to suggest as well.
What about you, Big?
I know what Blue's thinking.
What's Blue thinking?
He has to sing to the world.
He always says the same thing.
It wasn't me. I told you, man. Like, if that was innocent, I'd be calling up every news station I can talk to.
Well, you know what? You might be right. You know, because every single like high profile case. I mean, a lot of these the suspects have been going to understand. So you might be right. You might be right.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't encourage it, but that's just me.
He's gotta get on the chair and say, "I was out night driving, looking for owls. I was owl watching." As his alibi.
His alibi was the owls. What about you, Melissa? What do you think he's gonna? You think he's gonna come out and talk?
I think that Anne is going to. Well, obviously Bryan has the ultimate decision, but I think Anne is going to suggest that he wait. Similar to the Letitia trial, Letitia Stout, we didn't find out that she wasn't going to testify until the day where she would testify. So I think Anne is going to wait, see what state's witnesses come forward with, see if putting Bryan on the stand would be beneficial or if the witnesses are so solid that they're not going to risk it. So I don't think we're going to find out until really in the middle of the trial.
What about you, Shay? What do you think?
No. I don't think he's going to talk.
Thank you, Gail, for your $10 super sticker. I mean, I think they've kind of already put in some words there that he might be that he has the right to talk. You know, when they was talking about his alibi and not giving it. You know, one thing that tells me that there's a good opportunity that he might is that and that Ann Taylor may not be this, you know, all great lawyer unless Bryan Kohberger is really taking over the case, is the fact that they submitted that weak, sorry ass alibi. Like, I think it would have been better for Bryan Kohberger to not have said anything than to say that.
It was more of a confession than an alibi.
100%.
I'm still shocked by that. Like, what were they thinking?
Yes.
Yeah, like, I mean, we'll start off with Big Blue. Big Blue, what do you think is the angle for the alibi. You know, why even put one out if that's what your alibi is?
I think pressure is probably what got to him, that they had to put something out by the courts. I know, and then by him not saying anything at all, it was still putting more guilty and innocent towards him. Um, but I think the alibi, you know, what I mean, like I said earlier, he was out watching at night, and I don't know.
I just don't get why he would put that alibi. Jaime, do you see an angle there?
What was that?
Do you see an angle for him basically telling everybody that he was in the car
Yeah.
driving around at the time of the night that these incident occurred?
I want to say it was more of pressure, like, to come up with an alibi, right? But at the same time, him saying it, thinking that it might help, actually, I think for me, it looks like it hurt him. You know, it kind of confirmed somewhat of the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because after him saying that he was out there, he's like, oh yeah, I passed it, but I didn't stop. I just kept on going or whatever. You know, he can pretty much make up a whole story that fits for it.
Right. I'm gonna read this real quick. Avery Shannon comes on with a $10 super chat saying, "My question is how you three men got two beautiful friends on your panel. P.S. They got their looks from me. Great panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Big Blue, I think she referenced your good looks.
Yeah.
Obviously.
So what are y'all's thoughts on the alibi? We'll start off with you, Melissa. Where's the angle? What's the point of putting out an alibi like that? I honestly think that it would have been stronger not to say anything.
It's a great question.
Do you think Kohberger pulled that cord?
No,
because I don't think Ann Taylor, you know, if she's as great as people say she is saying that, hey, we need to put this out there.
I think that she knows what they have, obviously, and she knows that his car is going to be spotted. And this is my opinion again. You know, she knows his car is going to be spotted on that footage. She knows that, in my opinion, suspect vehicle 1 is his car doing those maneuvers as stated in the PCI. She needs to open up that window to accept that, yeah, no, I'm not denying that this is his car, right? We're not denying that. And I think she's trying to jump ahead and establish the 12 times prior that he's seen as a pattern of behavior. So I think she's trying to take that jump and to take the opportunity before they could use that against us. We're going to use it as a long established pattern of behavior. This is his history. This is something he's done. So she already knows what to expect. She already knows what she can and cannot fight. So to us, it's like, oh, wow, well, you kind of just admitted that. But she knows that's inevitable. So in my opinion, she's just trying to control the narrative the best she can ahead of time. And she's setting something up to come out in trial.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, that's true. But I want to see the time. So I want to see if it's a specific time that he would go out there, or, you know, if you're going for that drive at all times throughout the day, it ain't a pattern.
I mean, you know, I think Melissa said something that made a lot of sense there. She said, I think that they know that they have him out in his car. And I one thing that I think it is I think they have him leaving his apartment complex. There are cameras around that area. So I think they have him leaving the complex. They may not have him or say that is him in Moscow, but they have him leaving the complex. So if he says that he wasn't driving, that's a big lie, a big negator. Yeah. Erica asks, and I'm not sure it's not coming out on my stream here, but I see it over here on my chat. It says, wanted to clear up something because apparently some people think that we're all only guilty. What is our stance on guilty at the moment? You know, I said it before. I think he's about 80%. You know, I'm about 80% there with the evidence that we have. We don't know all the evidence, obviously, that's in this case. And so, you know, would I be able to or feel comfortable putting this man to the firing squad today? No, not necessarily. Not quite. And I don't think that you're going to find a jury with the information that they have right now that will. But I tend to think that there's a lot more information that we're not aware of, and that it's going to be pointing in one direction. And so At the moment, no, and I'm open to change. I've been open to. I don't stick to one narrative. That's how you end up. Looking like those that are still saying that Ron Logan was the bridge guy in the Delphi case.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you stick to a narrative. Evidence comes out, even a person says certain things, and if you stick to your narrative, that is what it is. There was certain points in this case where I was more 50-50. But as more information has come out and information as to how they've collected the evidence, what it means, I've been leaning more and more towards, yeah, this guy did it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we find out that there's a total lack of evidence in his car, DNA evidence of his car, ends up meaning some evidence of DNA. My 80% is going to jump up pretty high, about 20 points. And so, it just kind of depends. If they find the weapon and there's BK's DNA on that weapon too, I think it's going to jump up about 20 points too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same. Like, like we were saying, we went from 50-50 to like 80, thinking that he's guilty. But, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what we think. It's going to come up to those jurors at the end of the day, I mean, just look at Casey Anthony, who didn't think that, that she was guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened with that?
Yep.
Big Blue thought she was innocent.
Big Blue's always on the...
What?
Big Blue's always the guy that always has to be the different dude.
Are you serious?
My boy, Blue, you thought Casey Anthony was innocent?
No, they're joking. I thought she was the one.
but she's the one. He was trying to.
But no, I didn't say. Okay, so we did a Casey Anthony theory. I didn't say she did it by herself. I mean, I think it was a drowning incident, but I think her dad helped her cover it up. That was my theory, because the way the brother explained that, the same way they found the body in the bag, tied up, wrapped in a towel, was the same way that dad would discard the animals that passed away. Mm-hmm. So that was my theory. I didn't say she did it. She didn't do it, but I'm just saying it could have been a drowning incident, like they said it was.
I mean, even if it was that, I mean, there were so many red flags to put someone in jail for a while, and not even that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Florida messed up. I think they should have went for second degree and not first. Yes. I think that's what messed them up.
Yep. Yeah. So,
that was a crazy case, man.
I didn't say she was innocent, but I said that she had some help.
Misinformation.
I think the prosecution in that case kind of was a little bit overconfident. And I got a little bit concerned about the prosecution in this case being a little bit overconfident, being the fact that they wanted to demolish the house pre-trial. I thought that was something that was definitely a sign of overconfidence. Don't like it. I think that it's a powerful thing to have the jury walk through, that house and see, the layout and the size of the house. I talked to Olivia from Chronicles of Olivia not too long ago, and, we were talking about, I asked her about what she's seen there and things like that, because, you get a different perspective and a different view from being on scene and on location. Right. Seeing what the perpetrator was seeing and getting a feel for the landscape and things of that nature will make, clear a few things up that you can't tell from pictures. And so, one of the things that she had told me was how small this house was. Yeah, it was 3 stories and that and this and that. But,
really?
In person, it was a very tight home. It wasn't very large at all. And I was like, wow, you can't really see that from there. No, yeah, it was apparently pretty small. Yeah, it does. It does. It looks pretty big, but apparently, these housing units, they're, rental units, they don't have them that big, but it was pretty compact together. And so, that was one thing that she had told me from being there on location. Do you guys plan on going out there?
No.
No.
If I live closer, maybe. But no.
Yeah, I had not, but I want to.
We're thinking about it if the trial goes after the football season, I'll be honest with you.
No, it'd be awesome to go. If you have the opportunity to do it, I would do it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also cover So I have a different YouTube channel. I also have a different podcast group where I cover the Steelers, and so I have to cover them. And sometimes I go to a couple of the games this year, and I'll be out of town already in October. So I was like, man, I'm kind of hoping they push this back till after, hopefully February.
Yeah.
And maybe perhaps I'll be able to go at that point.
I don't think it's definitely not happening in October. I'll tell you that.
I don't think it is either.
If Alabama ever played Idaho, I would definitely be there in a heartbeat.
So,
I really did want to go though. I did consider that. But then I was like, I don't know. If I felt like if I did go, it should have been more near trial. But I'm just curious of the area. Like, this case has just like been so close to my heart. Like, I respect like the people that have been able to go out there and document things, and I have watched quite a bit of Chronicles of Olivia stuff recently too, just going back to see like what she was able to document while she was there. It's really interesting. One thing to be like watching videos versus like boots on the ground,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, 100%. We have a $20 super chat. My real question is, do you think Idaho messed up by putting the DP on the table for conviction? Or do you think they're that confident with the evidence that they have? Any chance of plea? We'll go round table. We'll start off with you, Shay, and then Melissa, Blue, and then Jaime. So do you guys think that they messed up by putting the DP on the table? Or do you think that's a sign of confidence?
You want to go first, Shay?
I don't think that they messed up by putting the death penalty on the table. I think that it would be probably highly expected from the community considering the egregiousness of the crime. So I don't think that they messed up by it. Doesn't mean that they're going to actually use it in court. We don't know yet. I think that's to be determined.
I think it's hard. Yeah, I think it's hard to determine because we don't know. Like it would be much easier to say it if we had an idea of the level. All I keep telling myself is 51 terabytes, right? Long Island serial killer has 8 terabytes. Like that's a lot. Now, granted, not everything is going to be solid, pertinent, information, like direct evidence, versus it's going to be hours and hours of footage and this and that. But still, that's a lot. And it's hard because we have this 2 opposing dueling images, being put out. We have the state who is seeking the death penalty and, saying that they have this really solid case. And then we have the defense who is like, you have total lack of DNA. You have nothing, you have this, that. And that's what they're supposed to do, but because there's that really tight gag order, we really don't know which, like what it's closer to, the state or the defense. So I don't know if going for death penalty was a bad move, because I have no idea what they have, but I do also have concern that maybe they're too cocky also. And the concern as far as there was so much public demand and pressure to make an arrest, like this could still be the right guy and they could have jumped the gun too, that could both be true at the same time. So I don't know.
100%. What about you, Big Blue and Jaime? Blue, we'll start off with you. You think it was a mistake or is it confidence?
Let me review the question one more time. So I was trying to fix my computer because I'm not sure if y'all having the same issues, but no, it's not frozen, but the chat's not moving at all on mine.
Yeah, it's not moving in mine either, dude.
I had to reload and it brought up a little bit, but I'm looking at it on YouTube and there's a lot of stuff, people posting stuff and I can't bring it up. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I'm stuck a few minutes behind. Mine is stuck on the first question that Avery had. Like I don't see anything past that. So I think StreamYard's having some glitches.
Yeah, StreamYard's pretty behind because there's like 1,000 more comments behind that.
So basically the question was, do you think that that it was wrong in the prosecution, like a bad step to ask for the DP? Any chance of plea? Or is that, the fact that they are asking for the DP, is that a sign of confidence?
I think that's a sign of confidence. I think they got enough evidence to say, hey, and I think that's what the families want.
Mm-hmm.
There was
at least 2 of them.
2 of them, yeah. I think there's one that didn't want that, but some people want an eye for an eye, so I think they're asking to try to, do we really want to, like I always tell people, do we really want to keep these people alive and feed them for the rest of their lives, and us waste millions of dollars on them. And they're really bad people.
Yeah, no.
Let the state make their mind, their choices.
We have Miss J coming with a $5 super chat. Lack of DNA is not unlike of blood. Bleach can degrade DNA. Sure. Hyman, what are your thoughts on the DP situation?
I don't think they messed up by putting it. I also think it's their confidence in having a verdict, guilty verdict, is pretty high. That's why they did it. But I think if they didn't put the death penalty, I think they would have done a plea by now.
Yeah. I mean, you think if they didn't, they would have gotten to plea?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. You see, I think that there's a better chance that they were going to do it regardless if the case was strong or not, in hopes that he would make a plea. I think it's like almost like a scare tactic. Like, all right, here's the, if you get this wrong, we're putting you to death. So, tell us the truth, and we'll spare your life. So I think it's more of a thing to. Because they can always take it off. They don't necessarily have to go for it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I got some pictures from the early on in this investigation. I kind of just wanted to go over and see a few of them and kind of get your guys' thoughts on a few things. First things first, out of this pictures, we noticed the silver, the silver Range Rover with the price sticker. Paper plates on there. Mm-hmm. Kaylee had just purchased this vehicle the day before. Like, don't you think that? Do you guys think that Kohberger knew, if this was Kohberger, right, and he was stalking them or whatever? We don't know. Do you think he knew that was their vehicle? And if not, that's a pretty big hurdle to go through. You know what I mean? To see a vehicle you've never seen before and then still make entry into it. Does that concern any? Like, Melissa, how do you feel about that? Well, what are your thoughts on that information? Do you think that he was aware?
Okay, so that's a great question, and it's something that I've pondered many, many times, because from the beginning, it's like I questioned, did he move to Pullman with the intention to do these kills, to work underneath BTK Professor? Did he, he has a lot of similarities from a few popular serial killers, actually. So it almost looks like, he may have a fascination and mimicking certain things almost. So part of me questioned, well, did he go there with the intention? And stalking these days isn't the same as back when you're outside the window with the binoculars. You could do social media stalking. But then we have the motions coming out that says that there is absolutely no connection with Bryan to the victims. And so it's like, do I believe he could have known that that was Kaylee's car? Yes. If he was actively following on social media, it tells you exactly where you are, what you're doing, your location, what you got, everything. And I'm sure she would have posted that on social media. But with her saying that there's none, it's like, okay, so if he went to that house, there would have been unknown vehicles. What would make him go in? Why would he take that risk of knowing how many people were there, whose vehicles were they? And that's why I'm really interested in if that means that he had absolutely no connection to the victims, but does that include the two surviving roommates?
Yeah, I would assume so. I think that would be a connection through the roommate. I don't think that, especially roommates that were there during the commission of the crime, I would assume that if they knew Bryan Kohberger, that would have been, one, I think they would have known who he was a lot earlier, and they wouldn't have needed that genetic tree first and foremost to eye him. And two, the fact that he admitted that he was driving alone, the biggest rumor was that he was supposedly, with one of the surviving roommates, or one of the surviving roommates knew about where his whereabouts were, things of that nature. Doesn't seem like that's the case with what his alibi is. I'm going to go through a few of these real quick. Let's see. So when it comes to the case, what do you guys think about the 8 hours that it took for the 911 call? Where do y'all feel? And we'll start off with you, Melissa. Where do you feel that why it took so long, first and foremost.
It's like the $1 million question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think. I'm not one of the people who believes that she shrugged things off and went to sleep, because if that were the case, and I'm referring to Dylan at least, because if that were the case, I would anticipate that she would have eventually woke up, had to use the restroom, which is right next to, Xana's bedroom, or went and got food, or she would have gone about her normal day. And that is when I would anticipate her stumbling across the bodies. That is not what happened. What we know happened were friends were summoned for one reason or another prior to 911 being called, which implies that you had some reason to not want to go out for whatever I don't know what that reason was. And so why I can't wrap my head around why something, I don't want to say something, because when I say that, I'm not saying that she had any involvement or anything like that, versus was just a really poor judgment call made here, where you convinced yourself of something different and then you were just too scared to go out and check and you wanted to wait for somebody. I don't know. But that's one of my biggest issues surrounding this case. And I think that that's really what's fueling a lot of the conspiracy and speculation, is that we have this unusual time gap that we don't know what happened. And so it's leaving a lot of room for people to fill in the gaps themselves.
Jeffrey H comes in with a $4.99. I emailed you of an interesting pic of the sliding glass door. Interlock mechanism looks gone. Interesting. I'll check that out. Now they may have pulled it out.
Yeah.
You
I
know
think I
what
saw
mean?
it. I think it was missing because it did. I also think it had a tape, red tape under the little arrow.
Right.
But
Trying
aren't
to
the
get.
sliding glass?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, aren't the sliding glass doors like one of the easiest to break into?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Like lockwise? That's what I've heard.
Big Blue has a sliding glass door to his bedroom.
No blinds.
He doesn't lock them. Let's see, y'all. I'm horrible at mathing, but 1056 and 289 likes. Yep. Let's get those likes up. This looks interesting. This looks kind of like it's outside of that second floor. Looks like somebody had their hands up here, but that could have been at any time.
Yeah,
that really could. This is when the state forensics. There's the drone. There's something specific I was looking for in these pictures. That's why I'm going kind of fast.
Is it that bedroom that is empty on the first floor?
No. Let me see if I can find them. Well, there's a couple things. So here's the thing. I think that. What do y'all think about the van's shoe print? I think it's. I don't think it's really anything. What do y'all think about the van's shoe print? We'll start off with you, Jaime. We know you like to wear Vans. What do you think about the Vans? I know that has nothing to do with the case, but I do know you wear Vans. What do you think about the Vans shoe print? Do you think that has likely anything to do with this case? I know it's in the probable cause affidavit, but what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Personally, I think that it's old. It's an old shoe print. But also going back to the 911 call, I mean, supposedly she saw a person, right, dressed in all black, and she was frozen in fear, apparently, right? So you would think after, she snapped out of it, at least she will make a call, right?
Right.
So, and that's where a lot of people don't understand, is that why so long? Why did it take so long? And that's gonna raise a lot of, a lot of speculation. Right. And I mean, if it was, even though we already know that due to the injuries that the victim sustained, probably they wouldn't have survived even if the medics were called in time. But I mean, it would have garnered more evidence since it was so fresh, instead of 12 hours later and people coming into the crime scene, including the police officers.
Right. 100%. I'm looking at this picture here. It seems like there could be some sort of footprint there. When it comes to the Vans, and knowing what, my theory is on Bryan Kohberger, as far as like, I think he had he's a very intelligent person. He understands and knows how law enforcement would investigate this crime. I think that he went in there with police style boots. And the reason, because if he stepped in something or left footprints, he would have known that police would have gone in there and they could have been confused for theirs.
That's a really good theory.
That is a good theory.
And I'd never heard that before, but that's actually really smart thinking.
I mean, so you're saying that he thought out everything except leaving his phone at home.
Well, the thing is about, the thing about the phone,
too.
he also forgot the sheath. But the thing about the phone,
sheath, and then the car. Use another car, Jesus, or hide better. You know, if that's if it, you know what I'm saying.
But
I think the only reason why he left the sheath is because he was interrupted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm the one that believes Kaylee was in her room and came into Maddie's room. So I believe that.
It's possible. You know, that's possible. I mean, Dylan in the probable cause affidavit Dylan states that she thought she heard Kaylee say there's somebody here. Right. And, maybe that's true. Maybe she did hear Kaylee say somebody here, and then she walked into Madison's room and, walked into something. That's quite possible. I think that it ended up going down with them both in the room there.
You think they were in the bed together already?
Yeah. They were up all night. They've known each other since they were little kids. I even told the guys, like, before it came out, that they were in the same bed. I told the guys, I was like, hey, you know what? I think they were in the same bed. I was like, these kids were together since, like, they were best friends since they were little. They grew up together. They went to high school together. They were drinking that night. They were on the phone calling Kaylee's ex-boyfriend all night and texting him. I can see girls going to bed together, especially after a night of drinking like that.
They had just got carbonara. They were making those calls to Jack. Kaylee was only staying there for that night. I could totally see them passing out together.
But why was Murphy in the other room?
Why wouldn't he be? I don't think that's unusual. He had a huge bed to himself. She would have put him in there undisturbed, right? Shut the door. What was wrong with him being in that room?
Because, I have a big dog, and my dog stayed with me everywhere.
But they only had that little bed.
Yeah, but he could still sleep on the floor and be with you in your room.
I don't know.
If you go out late at night and you come back at 2:00 in the morning and your dog's asleep in his normal position and you go to sleep somewhere else, do you go wake up your dog and bring him?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I think she may have just left her dog where he was at because it's his room also. It was his room, not just Kaylee's room. So I can see that being the case there, and I think that maybe there's a good possibility that the reason why Kaylee had more injuries is maybe she wasn't a target and it was a surprise to him that she was in there.
Interesting. Well, you got one on your side, Melissa. This is one we disagree on. I think.
Well, the truth is, we don't know, right? All we could do is share our opinions, and we'll find out.
Yeah.
And the fact too is that I don't think there's any screams. I know a lot of folks are saying that they think that there's this all-out brawl. Some people have some sort of misconception that Bryan Kohberger went in there and was going up against 4 trained, UFC fighters or something because they can't see the fact that somebody can commit a crime like this in 9 minutes. Missing the context that more than likely 2, maybe even 3 of the persons that were victims here were asleep, and all of them were intoxicated. Most likely, we don't know that for sure.
Right.
He wasn't going in there fighting or going up against people who were alert, armed, ready to go, fighting for their lives. And he had a big ass knife with him. That's a pretty big equalizer, if not, but definitely put things in a different perspective. And a lot of people say that they'll act in a certain way when put in a situation, like, for instance, having a knife or a gun pulled out in front of you. I can say that I have seen in 9 out of 10 people, when put in a situation where somebody pulls a knife out on them and or a gun, that their reaction isn't what they think that it would be. It's usually frozen shock, fear, run. It's not very likely, or it's not very often, unless it's a person who's been trained, that the initial response is to go attack and fight back somebody who has a weapon like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you.
And so I think that there wasn't any screams, and I think that that is an indication that this was a surprise attack by at least two, if not three, of the victims. And the coroner stated that it appeared that all of the victims were at least in bed when the attack occurred. What do you guys think about that situation? Do you guys think that everything happened in the bedroom? Do you guys think that maybe perhaps something happened elsewhere? We'll start off with Shay, and then we'll go Melissa. And then I want to hear about Hyman and Blue's thoughts on that as well.
So I believe that the perpetrator went upstairs first. So I believe that it was most likely Maddie and Kaylee. I have a feeling Kaylee woke up to what was going on and fought. And then I believe the perpetrator went downstairs, ran into Xana. I believe Xana ran to her room and a fight ensued there. I do believe that Ethan was asleep, may have woken up, but I do believe that Xana was the only one that was probably truly awake during the time of the incident happening. And then the perpetrator left. Now, I do believe what Melissa has shared, that he would have left the sliding glass door open the whole time during the crime, so they wouldn't have to touch anything.
Yeah.
So I do believe that. That's just my theory on it.
That makes sense. Yeah. What about you, Melissa? What do you think?
I have a close theory to Cheyenne. That's, I think Bryan made entry, immediately went upstairs to Maddie and Kaylee. I think that they were in the same room. I think it was quick. I think it was quiet. And that's when Dylan perceives it is Kaylee and the dog playing. I think that was the act of what was happening. On the way down is when Xana is either going to the kitchen, leaving from the kitchen, something with the DoorDash. That is when her and Bryan, or the killer, crosses paths. That's when Dylan hears there's someone in the house. I think Xana naturally would run back to her room where Ethan is. I think Ethan was sleeping at the time. A struggle ensued with Xana. That is when Ethan wakes up, and that's when they fight. And at that point, Bryan just killed 2, possibly 3 more people than he intended to coming in. Adrenaline is pumping. We know that it was loud enough to hear Murphy barking, a thud, and whimpers from the 50 feet away camera. So I think Bryan really didn't know how much time just passed. How loud was that? Oh, crap. And so I think he even saw Dylan on his way out. If Dylan really did see him, I think that he saw her. But at that point, he anticipated 911 was most likely already on their way, and he booked it as quick as he could. Then come around 9 a.m., he's sitting there waiting for an alert to go off, for the news, for the radio, for even a knock on the door, and nothing happened. And curiosity was killing him to the point where he decided to go do a drive-by. I don't think he was going back for the sheath. I think he was driving to see what activity was going on at that house, and there was none.
Yeah, no, I think you're pretty on to that. You know, I think that even if he went back for the sheath, going back at 9:30, there's just so much activity that's probably going on around that area at 9 o'clock in the morning. It would be extremely risky for him to enter in. Big Blue, where are you on your theory as far as, you know, who was first and how did it occur?
Okay. I'll give you.
He's got to go mute. Well, and Hyman looks like he's muted and away for a second. I'll say what mine is. Mm-hmm. I think that he did go in there. You know, my theory is that this all was because of some sort of like revenge for the area, police, law enforcement, the universities. And, you know, he gets shut down for the first time in the spring of 2022 from this area in the form of not being, you know, placed in the internship for the Pullman Police Department. And the reason I say that is because there's an email on April 22nd where he's thanking the chief of the Pullman Police Department for their interaction for his, you know, application for internship. And in the probable cause affidavit, it states and indicates that he had applied again in the fall. which would lead me to believe that he didn't get the job in the summer or in the spring. And after that is where, according, if you believe everything that's on Dateline, is when he purchased a knife off of Amazon. And so, he's gotten to a point where he's used to, he had a lot of turmoil in his life, and he turned it around. He had weight issues, he lost weight. He had substance abuse issues. He quit that and became a vegan and became a PhD student, got his master's from DeSales, was one of two students that was recommended for the PhD program. And, he's going to this rural area where he feels that he's probably the big fish in a small pond, and nobody's giving him the time of day. He's getting turned down left and right. His teaching assistant job is going to hell. And, people, the students that he's there to teach are constantly complaining about him. All those things are occurring. So in my opinion, I think that that's kind of what led up to him committing this crime. And then you also have the fact that he had that survey that he was communicating with violent offenders about their emotions and feelings during the commission of the crime. I think that added to it. That may have created the desire, the firing, and the treatment that he felt that he was getting from the area probably created the motive. And, those two things mixed, in my opinion, it's just my opinion. In fact, boom. I got to put the disclaimer at the bottom that Bryan Kohberger is presumed innocent. So
I was waiting for something to pop up. I was like, what is going on? And that's all.
No. So in my opinion, that's kind of where that's at. And I feel that that's where when he came into this house, he'd been following it. He's been stalking them for a bit. He walked in the back. He left the back sliding glass door open and went upstairs. I think that Xana saw the back door, sliding glass door open, and said, I think somebody's here, and turned around and walked out back to her room where Ethan was. And I think that as she entered the room where Ethan was, I think BK was coming down the stairway and went behind him, maybe even saw her walking that way and just followed behind her and walked in. And Ethan may have been asleep at that point and not even aware that Xana even said, I think somebody's here. If that was said in the kitchen and he was asleep in the bedroom, that would indicate also why he doesn't have any, there wasn't any DNA underneath fingernails to our knowledge, their fingernails or any of those things. And I would think that if they had that, that would be in the probable cause affidavit, because that is significant evidence against Kohberger.
It's so hard with the PCA because it's only enough to secure an arrest, not a conviction. But I do understand people's issues when they say, if they had something more solid, don't you think that they would have put it in? And part of me says, yes, I would think so. But at the same time, would they? Like with that latent shoe print that was found during the second round of processing, is that really all that they have? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think at that moment, that was all that they had.
To answer Christy Mack's question, there's like 10% in my mind that there was somebody else involved. Just because when he got arrested, he asked if anybody else was arrested. So, like, that question always stayed in my mind. Like, maybe somebody else helped him out.
I think it was about his dad. Not because his dad was involved versus they came in like a wrecking ball throughout the middle of the night. Who knows if Bryan got rid of something along that road trip back. They didn't stop and say, hey, this is what we're doing, right? They had to get a special approval to even go in at that time. And so I think he just asked because naturally his instinct would be, what's going on with my parents type of thing? Like, has anyone else been arrested? Who knows? Like he had, in my opinion, he would have a guilty conscience. And again, what if he discarded something along that path? He could have thought that his dad could get in trouble for something. So I don't really put too much weight into that as far as was somebody else involved in the crime per se.
Yeah. I get that theory too. So that's what my 10% that weighs in my head. But I gotta get going, guys. Nice talking to y'all. I gotta go to work.
Thank you, Big Blue.
Thank you, Blue.
Yeah, because
Christy Matt comes in with a $5 super chat asking Daniel Blue and all. So Daniel, you're not believing that there's even a chance that it wasn't BK or Bryan at all. I mean, is there a chance that it was somebody else? Maybe he had an accomplice. I doubt it, but is there a small chance that somebody else could have done this? And the biggest coincidence and unlucky man ever, Bryan Kohberger. I guess we don't know all the evidence, and I have some questions too. Like, for instance, you have the phone pings that put Bryan Kohberger at his apartment complex at one time. I think it was like at 2:44, and then at 2:46 or 2 minutes later, he's like, half a mile or 2 miles away or 3 miles away, and it just wasn't physically possible for him to get there in 2 minutes, unless he was going 60 miles an hour uninterrupted, to have been in those two places. And so that led me to believe that maybe perhaps there was two vehicles that were out there without a front license plate, because if they thought they were both Kohberger, the unique identifier was the front license plate. So maybe there's that aspect of it. But the biggest thing for me is the fact that his phone turns off before the crime, and then it turns on afterwards. And then you count that with the DNA underneath the body of a victim. I mean, I get it's touch DNA, but Ann Taylor did a really good job about describing where that DNA was, and it was inside the button of a sheath that was face buttoned down, so that way it would have been protected against all the because a lot of people ask, like, where's all the blood from the victim if it was underneath the victim? Well, it was face downward. There's a good chance that the other side, that part that was facing upward, is covered in blood. And who's to say that underneath that blood was more of Kohberger's DNA? Now, I don't think he intended on leaving that sheath behind.
Having to isolate it from the victim himself would be hard too.
And a lot of people say, like, how stupid would this guy? He does this perfect thing, and yet, he gets caught because he leaves a sheath behind. Well, I think that there's a difference between preparation and committing the crime, right? You can prepare for something. In my opinion, there's significantly less stress in preparing for it, making sure you're taping up things or whatever the case you might be doing, versus when it comes time to commit the crime and the amount of stress that you're undergoing at that moment. One of the biggest clues, in my opinion, about that is in the Linda Lane footage. In the Linda Lane footage account, also with the probable cause affidavit, you see a white vehicle go around that apartment complex 3 times. Now, after 4 a.m., which is after the DoorDash delivery is received, that's when that vehicle starts to act erratic per that video and the PCA. Now, what happens at 4? The DoorDash is picked up. So, apparently it is a total Xana move for the DoorDash to be happening late at night. Now, you can't pick your DoorDashers, right? So I would assume that Xana would have known that her house was in a particular weird area, and that it would probably be very difficult for DoorDashers, Uber drivers, things of that nature to find that house that aren't, familiar with the home. So I would have suspected that there would have been an indication, like a light on, whether it's inside and outside of the house. Now, once the DoorDash was received at 4 a.m., I think that whatever that indicator was turned off. Right now, Bryan Kohberger passes by there allegedly, and after 4 o'clock, he ends up doing this weird turnaround at 500 Queen Road, number 52. He then can't even park in front of the house because he attempts to, and then he fails, and then he goes and does a 3-point turn. Then he comes back and goes all the way around and gets behind the house. So immediately, once it's go time, he's already making mistakes. He's already acting nervous, and he's already doing things that would lead you to believe that more mistakes are to come. So I don't find it at all, odd that somebody would leave something so important behind, given the severity of this and the stress of the situation. Jaime mentioned before that BTK left back a gun behind at one of his cases.
He did.
And he had to go back for it. So I, for one, do think that it was a mistake. It wasn't by accident or any of those things.
Criminals make mistakes, but I will tell you one thing I felt like I got out of the quote-unquote alibi that Ann Taylor provided. I don't believe Bryan's the DoorDash guy now. I think Ann made that pretty clear. So I hope that takes out a theory for some people, because she pretty much solidifies that he's not around the house. That's what she's stating. So DoorDash would be.
100%. 100%.
There was also theories that apparently that Bryan supposedly sent that DoorDash, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Like, even if you do, like, you have to pay with something, right?
Yeah.
Well, if he wanted it, now ultimately it would lead back to him, but if he wanted to get a burner phone, and then when it comes to, because you could create an account, they're not looking to verify your DoorDash account, so you could put the name under Joe Schmo and then a payment method. You could use a DoorDash gift card or a Jack in the Box gift card.
Mm-hmm.
Now, ultimately, gift cards are traceable, and it would eventually lead back. But it was interesting because it said that Xana received the DoorDash. It doesn't say she placed it. That doesn't mean she didn't place it. It just didn't clarify one way or the other. So we went deep down that rabbit hole of, is it possible? But with the way, I don't think he ever would be the driver, but I did speculate whether he placed it, only because everything happens around 4 a.m. So normally, if he was sitting outside that house for 30 plus minutes, waiting to see the activity going on, hyping himself up maybe, then the moment that an unknown vehicle, if he didn't know it was DoorDash, approaches the home, alerts you that at least one, possibly more people are active in that house and awake, why would you choose that moment to gain entry? But I actually think it was you, Daniel, who was saying that, well, who said he was there? Because he was doing maneuvers and he wasn't just sitting right there. He was going in and out of the area. So it's possible that DoorDash came and left before he even saw that the vehicle was there to begin with.
Yeah. There's a good possibility that Bryan Kohberger passed by, saw lights on, and then passed by, saw the lights off, and assumed that it was just somebody awake and that they were ready to go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And had no idea. And I honestly think that's much more unlikely. Now, I have this picture pulled up. I was going through the pictures that were sent to me from this case, and warning, this is disturbing. I mean, if it is what it looks like it is, I don't know, but this does look like a mattress. I would assume that if this was one of the mattresses that was part of this important to the case, I don't think you would throw ladders and things on top of it. But if it is, there is some pretty clear indication of what looked like some stains under here. And, I do want to highlight the fact that you have a stain up here towards the top of the bed that would indicate that, whoever may have been attacked here, one, it doesn't look like there's hair all around it. So one could speculate that it was maybe perhaps Ethan, maybe in this one. I don't know. Thinking, I don't see hair, maybe a little bit. You can't tell if there was a two here, but it looks like if there's blood here, then there's a good chance that the throat was attacked. And if that ended up being the case, that's could be a reason why we don't hear screams.
Wait, hair on the exterior there?
No. I don't see hair. I don't see a lot of hair.
But isn't it zipped up? It's zipped up.
Right. But the stain here was what I'm referring to. I don't see stain.
Oh, okay.
Going further out,
like the lines.
I would have figured that there'd be a bigger stain mark.
I got you
if the hair got soaked, right? So, but what you can tell is that it does appear that, in my opinion, if this is what it is, I don't even know if this is what it is.
It appears to be, yeah.
If it is, then one, if that would indicate to me that Ethan could have been asleep or laying down in bed when he was attacked. And if the throat was attacked, then that would be an explanation as to why we don't hear screams.
But I think this would just be the mattress. I think the sheets and comforter and all that would already be taken into evidence. So we might not see some of what you're describing too. So this could just be where they were talking about a contained scene. The mattresses would have soaked up quite a bit. Also, I would think the floorboards and whatever gravity would take, right?
Right. And this is from the dailymail.com.
That's scary.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, it does go out pretty far, actually, now that I see this. So this could very well be, the hair. But it definitely does, to me, indicate that large area that was attacked probably was the throat, and then the right here looks like the midsection or chest, which is something that was described by the coroner.
Yes, it was more so in the torso.
And I've wondered why people think that they didn't do talks on the victims, because they did do talks.
Yeah, they did.
She just said that she didn't think it would be
relevant
to the cause and manner.
Correct.
Right. But I just still see people talking about how they didn't do talks and why don't we have the autopsies? And I'm like, they did do talks, and I don't believe that stuff will be released until it has gone to court. I think a lot of it's going to stay under the gag order.
Right. And I know, let me say this. If everything that Christy told me was accurate, they did do a toxology on the victims. Christy told me that they did. She did tell me that they didn't get, that she doesn't know the results of it. They didn't tell them the results, but they do know that they did get one. Now, in this image here, it doesn't appear that there's a secondary stain here.
That's what I was gonna say. It's like it just seems like it's on one side of the bed.
Yeah.
Do we know if that's Xana's bed or Maddie's bed?
Yeah, we don't know which one it is, but I would assume that if there's only one print or imprint there, that it's probably Xana's.
That's what I was thinking too.
It depends, because I've heard a theory of, for the people who think that Maddie and Kaylee were not originally in the same bed, that you would see the blood from Maddie with where she lied, and if Kaylee came after, I don't know how to say it without it sounding horrible, but Kaylee could have been somewhat over Maddie, and so it wouldn't be her physical body touching the mattress versus gravity just pulling some blood down, hitting the mattress, so you wouldn't see the full body outline, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's weird. But yeah, I heard that rumor too, that the bodies were stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, basically. I couldn't find a nice way to say it.
I think that was on. I think I saw it on Reddit too.
Mm-hmm. And then you have even blood on some sort of furniture that was inside of the house.
Probably like a nightstand kind of thing.
Anna's vanity, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm shocked that they brought it out like that.
You know, it doesn't appear that they're preserving the evidence the best way.
Yeah, because if we go off of some of the early interviews, they said that the reason why they waited so long to start the investigation was because they called in Idaho State Police and forensics. That's what they were waiting for, to come in and start investigating the crime scene.
You know, I just find it weird, that they're just transporting the stuff on the back of a bed of a truck. I would think you would get at least a camper or a box trailer or something, what I mean, or a big van. But out in the elements, especially because you see snow. Sometimes there's snow still on top of cars. It can get wet or whatever.
Yeah, I'm gonna
really careless. Yeah.
I'm gonna do a couple of super chats real quick that aren't popping up on StreamYard, but they're popping up on my phone. It says Cynthia comes in with a $20 super chat. Says Steelers fan and Daniel J. This is a gift for the baby. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, Cynthia. And then we have another $20 super chat from Desiree D saying thanks for the great show. I have questions about the LL footage. I'm still confused about it. Was Dot the one who bought it and tried to get everyone to publish it, or someone else? If I missed it at the beginning, sorry. Much love. We actually haven't even talked about that yet. We'll get into that here in a few minutes though. But thank you for your super chat.
Dude, I'm still at the super chat. Like the chats haven't moved up on my end at all.
Mine either.
No, they're not. We have 1,300 folks in the live chat right now. It only shows 885 on the side here for me because StreamYard is like glitchy and going crazy. We have a new member, Life, Love, and True Crime. Welcome to the social turkey spot. So, these are, they're encased here in these sheets that are for protectant to preserve the evidence. So I get that aspect, but when you look at this doesn't look well preserved.
It does not.
Hell no. That thing's, it looks like it's already, whatever they put on top of it's kind of rubbing off.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, look at this guy's handling. Where did this guy come from? I hope he wasn't in. No, look at this guy inside. Check out that dude right there. Look at that.
Right.
Look at that.
So where is this stuff going is my question.
Evidence room where I would have thought for processing for the lab.
I think these pictures are going to be hurdles for the prosecution to jump over.
Yeah. And look at everybody's shoes. Look at that. Look at all their shoes. If I were to commit a crime, I would be wearing some of these. You would have never known which ones were mine and which ones were these guys.
That's true. It's a good point. But just hauling it in the back of that, it does not seem like the correct protocol that you would follow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't. You would think they wouldn't have it in an open bed truck. They'd have it in a van of some sort, closed in, so that way, it don't rain or something on it. Dude,
I moved like 4 or 5 times, and out of those 4 or 5 times that I moved, it rained on me. It's like something. Like the weather knows when I'm moving.
Mm-hmm.
So you just expect them to like use a box trailer or a camper or something. But I guess
there's pain.
Yeah, there's pain.
Major pain.
Small guy.
Yeah. What do y'all think about Bryan Kohberger's size? Did that surprise you guys how big of a man he is? He's a pretty big dude.
I'll take him.
You'll take him?
In relation to Dylan with what her height is, or just in general?
Just in general. I mean, I think that a lot of folks were, especially when they initially saw just pictures of him, thought he was probably a lot smaller than what he was when he is escorted out with different law enforcement officers. He definitely towers over many of them, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean
I was repeating what you said.
No, I was just going to say I wasn't surprised. I had nothing to compare it to other than Dylan's height description, but I'm also one of those people, if you say, what height do you think that person is? I'm going to get it totally wrong too. So I don't put too much weight into that. So I wouldn't say I was surprised. I was just like, oh, wow, yeah, he's a tall guy.
I mean, also, I don't know. I just like going back to what Dylan said, right? Like she noticed what he was wearing, his bushy eyebrows, but she never noticed a knife.
Well, I mean,
especially without a sheath, where are you gonna put it?
Right. No, I get that. I get that 100%. But I mean, you open up, and look, I think this is perhaps one of the pictures that Jeffrey H would say. And you kind of see where it's kind of broken there. But I think if you open the door and you see somebody you're not expecting, a masked figure, you might just not. You just might just stay straight at what you're looking at. I don't know if you're going to be looking up and down and processing everything, especially if that's not what you're expecting. The guy in a mask, and I get people are saying, oh, it could be, it's 2022 at the time and masks were still a thing, COVID, yada, 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 right? But, the college students had basically revolted against the mask. That's why they had that sticker gate. That was from the college kids going up against it. They weren't for it. They were against it. Yeah, they didn't want it. Yeah. And so I thought that was pretty weak. What do you guys, what are your thoughts going to be if you find out come to trial that the surviving victims were messaging each other during the crime?
And let me ask you this: is it possible for the criminal charges to be brought up?
I don't know if you want to press charges against your witness, though.
I mean, no, I'm saying because they're not reporting a crime, right?
If they knew a crime occurred.
Yeah. I don't know what I would think about that, man. That'd be crazy.
Well, what do y'all think, Melissa? How would that make you guys feel about their testimony, those things? if let's just say they even talked about it, like, did you hear something? What was that? Like, if they were conversating about what they heard.
I think context is extremely important. Like you said, what were they conversing about? I really don't know how to answer that. It would really be what did the messages contain? How much did they know? How much was the messaging back and forth? Was it one simple message of like, yo, did you hear that? You know, like, or was there a continuous back and forth? Was there attempts to contact the other roommates? Like, I would have to know more, but obviously it doesn't sit right with me. But at the same time, I'm like, she was young, and that doesn't, excuse anything, versus can I think that someone young and not in the right state of mind made a stupid decision, which unfortunately, I don't know. I think that it'll be a major issue in court. I think there's going to be a lot of major issues in court. I think the fact that friends were summoned whatsoever and walking through that crime scene is going to be a major issue.
I agree.
I can see that. I can see that being a huge issue. Them waiting until that time comes across. Now, I've heard rumors. I don't know how true they are, but that they were. I think it was actually JLR also had reported that he had sources that indicated that they were texting each other during the commission of the crime, and so
during it,
either during or right after. Now, either or, if that ends up being the case, do you guys find it hard to believe that if they were texting each other, that they could have texted maybe somebody else outside of the house?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if someone, once we found out friends were summoned, once we know there's that 8-hour time period, I don't think it's implausible whatsoever to believe that someone outside of that house knew something. It may not known what it was or the magnitude, but knew something, especially even if it was right before 911. Once friends were summoned, how impossible is it to believe that someone would have sent a text out who sent a text out who, and it ping-ponged around? That wouldn't surprise me whatsoever, especially if within that 8-hour period she's sitting there, she's stressing out, she's probably going to be texting many people. Now, that again, it circles me back around to the context of the messages are what's important, what was stated within the messages.
Mm-hmm. Got you. Yeah, because I think that maybe perhaps there was some messaging during that time. Even Christy told me that she had heard, and she didn't tell me exactly who she heard it from, but she had said that she had heard that supposedly Dylan had called out, and she wasn't sure if it was audible or if it was over the phone or text message, but she had called out to the victims. She wasn't sure how true it was either. She didn't hear it from the police, because I would have assumed that she would have been more confident about his validity if it was from the police department. And so I'm not sure who she heard that from. If that, maybe it was from the grapevine through, she was in conversations with a lot of Kaylee's friends. Maybe one of Kaylee's friends knew Dylan, and that was the rumor coming out of Dylan's party. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. But that she had apparently called out, and she had looked at the phone records, and that the phone records didn't indicate that it was a verbal phone call. It could have been a text message, or it could have been just walking out and yelling. But if the surviving roommates did text their friends that night, or each other, during the commission or shortly after the commission of the crime, hey, did you hear that? Did something happen? Or whatever the case may be. I don't find it impossible that they would have texted other people outside of the house, like, hey, we just heard some crazy stuff. And I think that could be the source of what a lot of people started hearing as far as rumors early in the morning when people started waking up.
I agree with that.
I can see those two things being true and real, and those rumors starting to go crazy. And especially in a small town where, one, if that is true, right, then you have information that is spreading before police or news media can even get out there and verify the information. And so who knows how wild those stories could have gotten.
Mhm.
I mean, I know you have to get going soon. Do you have any final words or anything before you leave?
I think at this point there's going to be enough hurdles on both sides for the prosecution and for the defense. I think most of them are going to be from the prosecution standpoint. It's going to be, the evidence, the containment and all that stuff, or how they processed all that stuff. Also about maybe even how they obtained the search warrants.
Right.
On the defense side with Bryan, it's gonna be DNA, obviously, and who knows what's on those 51 terabytes.
Right.
And then plus the alibi that he has, that he put out there. Those are few of many on both sides. But at this point, I'm still at 80% that he's guilty of this crime. There is that 2% that 1% that he's not, 1% that there was an accomplice.
Gotcha. So you're there, but almost there.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Melissa Jade.
Thank you, Jamie.
Hopefully we can get together again and do it again all over again.
It was very nice meeting you.
Likewise. Y'all take care.
You too.
Thank you, Jaime. You have a good one.
You too,
so
man.
we had a super chat earlier referencing Linda Lane, and was Dot responsible of Linda Lane? I think you guys probably have a little bit more of an idea about that whole Linda Lane footage of Dot situation. I know a little bit about it. Do you guys think that Linda Lane and Dot are coming from the same source?
Yes. Not one person, the same circle, yes.
The same circle. Gotcha.
The same circle that may not have pre-existed prior to this case, but at some point came together and now are working together. If that's very confusing, I apologize.
No, it's not. So you think that? So I was reached out by somebody that goes by the name of Claire Mack, and that sent me some information. So do you think that Claire Mack and the person that was claiming to be Dot, because there's supposedly a real person that is out there that Dot is supposedly claiming to be?
Yes.
And so do you think that those two people, the impersonator Dot and Claire Mack, are in the same circle?
I think Claire and Amber are in the same circle. I think Kim and Dot are in the same circle. And I think these two circles somehow overlap. Now, whether they're the same circle itself, I do not know. If they've just come together and started to overlap, I don't know. But I see these two circles and they're somewhat crossing one another.
Got you. And so when you say Kim, are you referring to WSU Mom Kim?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just making sure. That way everybody's on the same page. Now, do you think that Kim and Dot have been working together or have known each other this entire time?
Whether they've known each other this entire time or more recently, I don't know. But what I do believe is that they know each other now. Yeah.
Got you. Interesting. Yeah, I've talked to Kim in the past, and I haven't really talked to her recently, especially since I've never said that she's lying or any of those things, but I just don't necessarily follow the rumors that she's been told. And I say that they're rumors because none of the information, and we've said it multiple times. I've even brought out screenshots. In fact, I'll do it again here in a minute. But we have stated multiple times that there it is. From the few conversations that we've had with Kim, and this was referencing the last time we've had her here, and this is in the comment section. What she has told us is she got an alert to stay in shelter while in Pullman around 5 p.m. She called her daughter, who said she was aware of it and had been since the morning. Later, as info comes out, she finds out that 911 call came in at noon. She questioned her daughter about the time, and that's when her daughter said maybe 10:30. Never stated that what she is saying is accurate, just that she is who she says she is, and that this is what she's heard. I do want to emphasize heard, that the info, although it comes from the area, does not come from anyone directly. Um, you know, her info comes from, according to her daughter, who got it from a friend of hers, who got it from that person's boyfriend, may have heard it from somebody close to the Pi Fives. There's a lot of connections there before it gets to Kim.
Yep.
Right. And so we wanted to emphasize that what she is saying was the rumors. Now, what we wanted to talk about was what she may have known firsthand, which was her daughter said she was aware maybe around 10:30 in the morning. So that was the part that we're like, all right, what does that mean? Because that is closer. Like her daughter actually knew. So, okay, there could be some truth here. We find out from the probable cause affidavit that other people were, summoned to the house prior to the 911 tape. And given how many people this story went through before it got to Kim, even her story of multiple people being there was multiple people there. There was a DoorDasher at 4, and then there was allegedly Bryan Kohberger. So, by the time it gets to 2 people and somebody saying, hey, there was somebody outside, somebody inside, now, who's to say that story didn't turn into 5 people outside? And that was one of the things that we tried to emphasize. But I will say this. Early on in our conversation, she never mentioned Dot or Dot's story to me.
She never mentioned a lot of things that she eventually mentioned down the line, correct?
Correct. But I think that she would mention everything. She was like, boom. She would, like, especially early on when we first started talking, articles that were coming in of people that were passing away from overdoses and things of that nature from the area, issues and things that were coming, news articles. It was a bunch of those type of things that she was constantly sent me. And whenever she heard a rumor, she would come forward and say, hey, I heard this, I heard that. So that leads me to believe that at that point, that she wasn't either aware of Dot or hadn't heard Dot's story yet.
Well, I had heard that there was a call between, and this, again, I can't verify that. This is what I literally heard. That there was a call between Dot, Kim, and another creator. Now, I don't know at what point Dot and Kim may have crossed paths, if any. That's to say if that's true. I wasn't on that call, so I don't know. And it may only be more recently when Dot popped up that may, that relationship may have started. Like, hey, you're somebody else who's saying something that is similar to what I'm saying, type of deal. I don't know. It's just something I heard. That. And I think it's telling when it's always the same few names that pop up consistently with a certain narrative that strikes my interest, and I always side-eye that type of stuff.
Well, I'll say this, that Kim is very active. Like, for instance, when Dave came forward to me, she was almost a little pushy about, wanting to talk to Dave or help Dave out if he needs anything. In my opinion, she was trying to kind of figure out who he was, type of stuff. So I wouldn't put it past, her, like, she has communication with certain creators, and those creators have communication with Dot, that they would have linked up through that avenue. That sounds plausible to me. What I'm saying is, I don't think that it was always the case, because I think I would have heard that, as open as she was to me in the beginning, like I said, she's not as open as she was. We still have a respectful relationship. She understands that I don't really necessarily buy the information that she was told. She also understands that I don't necessarily believe that she's a liar or any of those things. I think that the telephone game that she was playing created a pretty exaggerated story. Is there some truth there? I think that there is, but I don't think it's all truth. Two things can be right at the same time. Somebody can be who they are, and somebody can have information, and that information cannot be 100% accurate too.
Well, my issue always was just repeating it as fact, like it's because from all of the things I heard, it was not, this is what I heard, or this is what I believe happened, versus this is what happened. Like, no, we need people to be outraged, X, Y, and Z. But when you get down to it, have you ever seen anything with your actual eyes? Once she said no, that's that. That doesn't mean that it's not possible that it's true. Who knows? There's a possibility that every single thing she said is true. but we don't know and we can't state it as fact. We can't rely on that information.
Right. No, I agree with you. I agree with you 100% on that aspect. And that's why, like, for instance, you know, when we went through our process, like, we didn't go into a lot of the great details of, you know, the information that she claimed that she had about the, you know, the injuries and things of that nature. You know, we tried to specifically stay around, all right, 10:30. What was your daughter told and by who? And then, you know, once it got to a point where we started to see a little bit of a pattern of how everything kind of circles around the same sort of people or person, we kind of were like, all right, I'm not saying that it's not possible, but, you know, it's kind of, I just don't think she's as close as she thinks she is to the case.
I think there was a little nugget of something that she was told, and I think there's a good chance that nugget is legitimate, and that nugget started to roll and roll and roll, and as time went on, it was a sticky nugget, and it started to collect whatever it rolled over, and it just kept building and building and building, and that's what I think is most telling is, if this was always the truth doesn't change. The truth always remains constant. So before anybody, if Emma Bailey, right, and I don't like throwing out her name, but let's just say Emma Bailey, right, because she's been involved in a lot of these rumors. If she was always involved, Kim would have known about her prior to anybody on YouTube finding out about her. And she would have been saying this name, like, you guys don't know her, but listen, this person has involvement. But it's not until the narratives that are coming out publicly that it's like, yes, I know that person too, you know, and this is, they're connected in this story, and my twice removed cousin over here who was dating this guy, you know, and it's like, how is it that the story is evolving more and more? So I think that it could be based off of a little truth, and I think that truth is that people had heard that something happened prior to 911 being called. How is that such a far stretch? Friends were summoned. If one of those friends even sent one text out, that text, you know, that whoever received it sent another text out, bam, that's hearing about it prior to 911 being called. Now, where it went from A through Z without going through B to Y, I don't know how we get to all that. Those are some major jumps.
No, 100%, 100%. And so, yeah, you know, I understand as well. You know, I get what you're saying, and you know, I've always thought when it came to Kim, she was just somebody who was super invested in the area because her kids attended college there, and was following every single rabbit hole that came across, and maybe perhaps confused what she's following and believing with what she heard. You know, that was kind of my feeling about it, and even with Dave, I felt that. You know, I think that in his situation, I think he's blending some days together, to be honest with you. You know, and I've said this a couple of times. You know, when it comes to Dave, he wasn't talking about what he knew, you know, November 14th or December 14th or January 14th. It wasn't until late April where he started coming out talking about what he'd known. And he was thinking about what had occurred 6 months earlier about specific days. And one thing that he said was, and it wasn't on mine, it was on TNT, was that he called in to work that day. And I was like, you know, I thought to myself, I was like, well, if he called in at 9:30 in the morning, one, you know, wouldn't your employee or employer ask, like, what are you talking about? You know, look it up. Quadruple homicide on King Road. Hey, there's nothing here. There's absolutely nothing. Like, are you sure this happened? And two, he said that he had to be at work at 9:30 because they opened up at 10:30. I asked him where he worked. When I looked it up, on Sundays they don't open until 11:30, so he would have had to have been there at 10:30. On Mondays is when they opened up at 10:30, and he would have had to have been there at 9:30. And so that's why I thought perhaps, you know, those days are blending together. And I don't think he's doing anything on purpose. I think, you know, more than anyone, I think he's telling the truth about a lot of stuff. You know, and I'm okay sharing. Like, I have an interview with him. I'll share it with you guys so that you guys can verify it and verify, you know, how honest you think he is. And, you know, he's a guy that, in my opinion, you know, he lost his friend, which was not related to the, you know, the Idaho 4. He lost his friend, and he got kind of mixed up in the whole true crime stuff because he was researching about his friend's case. You get what I'm saying? And so it is what it is what it is, and I think their stories have created a lot, but I don't think they're without some sort of information being accurate. And I do think that perhaps, people were aware of something early that morning. Even the drug aspect, right? The possible overdose stuff. Even Christy heard that.
Yep. Well, that kind of goes back into friends may have hearing something. Listen, if you were a college age student, right, and you were living that type of lifestyle, and you heard that these kids just died, would your first assumption be a quadruple homicide with a K-bar saw knife, or would your mind go to something more rational, like, well, did they OD? Were they given a bad batch of something? Could this or that? I think that they heard something had happened, but they didn't know the specifics. And just like we all do, we fill in the gaps with what makes the most sense to us at the time. And I think the possibility of an OD, the same way Chrissy heard that Kaylee was shot, right? Pretty early on. It was all of those things make more sense than automatically going to someone broke in and killed them all with a knife. I think that it's just something that went around because they just knew or heard that they passed, and all it takes is one person to say, well, I heard it's this, and bam, 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 and it plays telephone.
Yeah, 100%. This is actually the picture that Jeffrey H had sent me. He was in the super. This looks different than the other one that we had looked at. This looks like the top part was taken off. They're
spraying something.
Yeah. I think they're trying to get DNA and stuff out of underneath of it. It's interesting, though.
That is.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Josh.
Wow.
So I know you guys aren't sure about guilt or innocence when it comes to Bryan Kohberger. What is the biggest piece of evidence or information that's out there that leads you to believe maybe Bryan Kohberger isn't the guy? If any.
Go first, Shay.
Me? Oh man.
Put you on the spot.
That he isn't the guy. I've had a hard time thinking one person did it, even though I know it's possible. But after Bryan was named as the person that did it, and what I've been told, not obviously haven't heard much from his parents, it made more sense to me how he could do this solo, opposed to having two people. So I've always been kind of stuck on just him being the sole person and the time frame of it. I understand it's possible, but that's a lot of adrenaline and very quick because you leave two people alive. So if he didn't take everybody out, then he had given himself a time limit to be there.
Right.
Like that's the only way I could think of it. So that's just been where I've been stuck on it with him.
Melissa, is there anything that stands out in this case that makes you think that maybe perhaps somebody else committed this crime?
So far, with what we know publicly, I have not seen any evidence that points in the direction that somebody other than Bryan likely committed the crime. That doesn't mean that it's not possible, but so far I've only seen evidence that points towards Bryan. While at the same time that I don't think it points in any one specific person's direction, I think that the holes, though, causes that reasonable doubt that some things, like, I think that it's likely Bryan, but there's something that doesn't quite fit here. And I don't think that that's necessarily another person. I don't think anybody else was involved, but I think we're going to get thrown something that none of us are going to expect in the courtroom. But I don't see, it's not so much, is there one thing I could think of that points to Bryan's innocent versus there are things that don't add up while still acknowledging that there's evidence against Bryan, if that makes sense.
Right, 100%. For me, I think the only thing that kind of make me question, is there something else, going on? Obviously, is the 8-hour gap, from the surviving roommates. Is there a reason behind it? That would, be in favor of Bryan Kohberger. The fact that there are certain things that it appears the defense is making it appear that the prosecution is refusing to give, right? You also have the Brady Giglio type of stuff that they had found, whatever that is. We're not 100% sure. To me, I think that maybe perhaps, it not being Bryan Kohberger and saying that, because I was thinking maybe there's a lack of DNA in the house of Bryan Kohberger. If the only DNA is in the sheath, that's a little weird when you have a quadruple homicide with a knife involved. That's a personal weapon. But at the end of the day, somebody committed that crime with just a knife, and and the victims didn't get that person's DNA under their fingernails, to our knowledge. But you also have the cigarette butt that that law enforcement went and grasped on somebody without their knowing. And I think the defense is going to try to utilize that as like, why did you give this person the Bryan Kohberger treatment? Was it because, and by what I mean by that is like, take his trash without knowledge. Was that because this person refused to give up a sample of their DNA? Or was it because you didn't want to alert them like you did with Kohberger? You know what I'm saying? Because there's only one or two reasons that they would have done that in secret.
That's a great point. Maybe they didn't even try to get it directly from him versus they went about it sneakily.
Right. And why would they do that? I mean, if they did that to Bryan Kohberger, they did it sneakily, probably because they had high suspicion that he was the guy. Mm-hmm. They have high suspicion of somebody else.
It's a great point.
So those are the aspects that I can say, all right, is it possible that somebody else did this? And that's the only thing that I can logically think of. But it's just so hard to overcome the other hurdles there, as far as his phone being off, the DNA on the sheet, the no front license plate, his admitting that he was in his car driving around that night. Like, all those things are hard to overcome.
Yeah,
100%. Do you think that? What do you think would be needed for it to be a slam dunk case? The weapon?
Mm-mm.
Confession?
Mm-mm. They're one of the victims' DNA and Bryan's. Well, I mean, obviously the weapon would be great. A confession would be great. Yeah, both of those would equate a slam dunk, but I don't anticipate either of those. What would be great? I'm not as surprised if Bryan's or the killer's DNA is not in their house. I am more surprised that none of those 4 victims' DNA would be in his car or apartment. That is strange to me. So I think what we need is at least one of those victims' DNA in his car.
Mm-hmm.
That would be pretty concrete, in my opinion.
Interesting. Yeah, I think so too. I think having their DNA on him somewhere that'd be slam dunk. What do you guys think he was doing on Nevada Street for 9 minutes before he took off to Moscow?
You want to go, Shay?
I don't. You go first. I don't know. I'm more of like what was happening afterwards. That gap of time, like, just completely gets me. I want to know if he has a hidey hole somewhere, because that would be a slam dunk for me, Daniel. If you ask me, it would be if you found the hidey hole and you found the weapon and everything there, it would be slam dunk. There you go.
That definitely would be. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I wouldn't, if they found that. That definitely would be a slam dunk also, especially if it was in the area where his phone went off. You know what I'm saying? Where they have him pinged at in a certain area. They find it in that area. I think that's pretty solid.
Yeah.
But even if they do, we won't know. I mean, they're going to keep everything quiet right now.
Yep. You did a live about this yesterday, right?
I did.
Yes. All right.
So I'll give you guys my thoughts on it as well, but I wanted to hear what you guys thought first. So, Melissa, what do you think about this area?
Nevada Street. Is this?
Is that where the police station is in view?
I think WSU police station is somewhere over here, but yeah, it's somewhere around here.
So this is in Washington.
This is in Pullman, Washington. Yeah.
What was
This
he
is
doing on
so.
Nevada Street?
The affidavit states that. Which page?
I didn't
was it
get
on?
to
Like
finish
7?
your live. Sorry, I wasn't feeling very well yesterday.
Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. Was it 7 and 13? Was it on 13? All right, no, it was on 11. Let me find it. I found it. So basically, what it was saying was that at 2:40 something in the morning, he is seen traveling off of Stadium Way, heading north on Southeast Nevada Street.
Right.
And then at 2:53, he's heading southbound or something like that towards SR 270, and giving him about 90 minutes of.
Oh, I saw it.
Yeah, I see. It's right here. So right here goes. Finally, it says footage off of Washington State University WS campus in Pullman, Washington Review that a video indicated that at approximately 2:44, a white sedan consistent with the description of the white Elantra suspect vehicle 1, which had no front license plate, that was the unique identifier in that situation, was observed on WSU surveillance cameras traveling north on Southeast Nevada Street at Northeast Stadium Way at approximately 2:53 a.m. The white sedan consistent with the vehicle was observed traveling southeast on Nevada Street. So there's about a 9-minute area. Now, to me, I know there's been a lot of questions like, was he traveling on this side of Stadium Way? For me to say it was traveling northbound at Stadium Way leads me to believe that it's north of Stadium Way, which is this red arrow. Right? So what would he be doing? I think that WSU, I'll look it up real quick. So I'm accurate. That's way over here.
A decent amount, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good distance away. If you're going up Stadium Way, you could get there, or this back road. If this was the area. So, what do y'all think he was? What do y'all think he was doing over here? I think it's important.
Where was his storage unit at?
That was at his apartment complex.
Where's his apartment complex in correlation with this? Just curiosity.
Right here. It's pretty north.
Pretty north. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's about 2 miles away. Which makes it difficult to get there in 2 minutes.
Okay.
So I'll tell you what my theory is.
Give us your theory, because I haven't looked into this too much, but it's a great question.
Yeah, you're just sitting down another rabbit hole. Thanks.
The Office of Academic Engagement is
look
where
at that. You got it little pick up too.
Yeah, right here. Perfect. Office of Academic Engagement, I think, is where he went. This is where student employees have offices and can go and do their studies and things. My opinion is Bryan Kohberger was attempting to commit the perfect crime. There are certain things you're going to have to do. One thing that kind of makes me believe that is when he left the sliding glass door open, right? Mm-hmm. Christy told me that was one of the things that they suspected happened. I found a press conference with Fry where he said that the sliding glass door in the back was still open when they arrived. And so it makes me believe that it was open the entire time. And the reason that Christy had mentioned was because that she stated police felt that he wanted to touch as little as possible, so that way it would give him the least chance of leaving DNA behind. Mm-hmm. And then you find this weird ass route that he takes after the fact.
Right.
Now, the reason why I believe he took that route is because he would have known, and it says in the probable cause that they suspected that he would have traveled directly from Moscow to Pullman down that back road that comes off of Palouse Road. And I wondered, why would they put that in there? Because we know he didn't go there. His phone turns on 10 miles south. I don't understand why they would put that in the probable cause affidavit. And so I was like, all right, that's confusing. I was like, why would they put that there? And in my opinion, I think they put that there because that's an indication of when law enforcement would have been looking at cameras for vehicles entering Pullman from Moscow. And so he took this long ass trip that took over an hour because police wouldn't be looking for a car coming into Pullman an hour after the incident. He knows how they're going to investigate him. I don't think it's a surprise that he turns his phone off 10 miles away from the victim's residence and turns it back on 10 miles away in the opposite direction. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that, you know, he didn't get offered the position in Pullman as the intern police officer. And then his second time around in the fall, he writes how he wants to help rural law enforcement agencies better collect technological data and cloud and forensic information, basically saying, I'm here to help you backwoods law enforcement officers figure out how to use technology. Right? So why would he be so upset? It's probably because he didn't get picked the first time. And I think that him taking his phone was a way of saying, I'm going to take my phone and turn it off precisely when it needs to be turned off and turn it on precisely because I'm going to outsmart you. And that's one of the characteristics that we've heard about him, was that he wanted to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people who said that.
Now, for me, what I think he's doing is he's picking up his tools that he used to plan this crime. And I think he left everything here. Now, one of the things that Steve says,
pulled like an Israel keys, had a little bag ready to go.
Yeah, I think he had a bag ready to go, and I think he had it here this entire time
in the building
up until this night. Yeah, or in that area. You don't want to take that back to his house. No. This place here is for anybody, and he would have keys to it because he's a student, employee, or TA or whatever.
And it wouldn't be monitored. No login, no log out, no cameras.
Yeah,
nothing.
It's free for everybody. So anybody could go in there. He didn't even necessarily have to go into the building, to be honest with you. He could probably just park outside of it and use their Wi-Fi, right? And anybody who's a student, teacher, say whatever, would have access to that Wi-Fi. And so it wouldn't necessarily come back to him. Now, one thing that Steve had mentioned, saying that his phone may have touched the Wi-Fi or whatever at that house. I think that he would have possibly been aware that if he would have taken things like, let's just say, a burner phone or a burner tablet to his apartment, that there's a good chance that that device is going to want to connect with his Wi-Fi, and that could bust his ass if that ever is found, because it's connecting to his IP address, his phone, his stuff. So I think he kept everything separate, right? And I think he kept it here, and I think there's no surprise that there's nothing found on his phone, on his tablets, or any of those things of stalking or any of those things, because, you know, he even put it in his essay that was his expertise, was cloud forensics and better technical understanding technical data, right? That's what his expertise was. So, you know, as much as people say, oh, he's stupid enough to leave the sheath and that and the third, I don't think he's dumb enough, you know, and that's because that's not in the preparation, I think that's in the moment.
Exactly. In the moment, right?
Having a burner phone or whatever the case may be is part of the preparation. Now, if the optimum goal is to commit this crime, he wouldn't need the laptop anymore or the notebooks or whatever he used to plan this crime. So my thoughts are he picked up whatever it was that he used and he took it with him to the crime, because his intent was, after he left, he was going to dispose of not just the weapon, his clothes, his shoes, but also the tools that he used to plan this crime as well.
Where do you think he went between 5:30 and 8:30 when he disconnected from the network on the evening of the 13th?
I think first and foremost, he went back somewhere in between the victim's residence and where his phone turned on. Reason being is at 4:20, he's seen traveling at a high rate of speed off of Walenta Drive. His phone turns back onto the network on 95 near Blaine. You know, to go from the victim's residence to Blaine, Idaho is 10 minutes. So to be on the highway is probably a little bit quicker, maybe 7 minutes. Traveling at a high rate of speed, maybe 6. But it took him 28.
Right.
So I think that he had something somewhere predestined over here, went over there, picked it up, and he may have had several different times. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he had a hole dug somewhere over here or a canister or a box or whatever, something to hide whatever he's all of the tools. And then he had another place somewhere in these mountains over here, ready for the next day when he goes back, pick up the tools of the crime, and then take them to a more secluded, further location.
I agree with that.
Those are my thoughts behind what he was doing and why it took so long as well versus the 28 minutes. I strongly suspect that it was BK. Can I say he's guilty 100%? Not yet. Not until we see
Nobody
everything.
should, and I see a lot of people who say that is, well, I couldn't convict him and sentence him to death based on what we know so far. You shouldn't. Nobody should. Right now, the PCH just words on a piece of paper. Trial is the time where they produce the evidence. They prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, so nobody should be at that point. He is innocent until proven guilty, but acknowledging that there's evidence pointing to him is not synonymous with he's guilty,
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So we have a $49.99 super chat from Anna P. She's saying, I was wondering if BF's exonerating testimony could be her placing someone else at the scene, and only that doesn't sit well with the lack of DNA at the house. No bloody clothes, gloves found. I hope prosecution can answer these. So it doesn't sound like, to be honest with you, it doesn't sound like Bryan Kohberger and his defense team know for sure that one of the state witnesses have exonerating testimony. If they did, I think they would have been using them as a witness for themselves, not just somebody that they plan on cross-examining or talking with. And so that's the first thing. And the second thing is, as far as them placing somebody else at the scene, I think that's the hope, that they can, during that cross-examination, get somebody to slip, maybe say something to the effect like, oh, I recognize the voice or something like that. But, hearing somebody's voice and thinking you heard something, I mean, police think that Dylan heard Xana say, I think someone's here. And Dylan thinks that she heard Kaylee say it. So that can kind of tell you, somebody who knows, that's their roommate. They live with that person. And it sounds like there's at least a little bit of confusion as to who they heard. So I don't know how much validity you can put on somebody hearing somebody else's words when they were tired and possibly under the influence of alcohol.
Right.
But so this is the street that they suspect Bryan Kohberger would have exited. And this is Palouse Drive, which connects directly to Pullman, Washington, this back road, which would have put him back into town like before 5 o'clock. But he's there after 5:26. So.
Right. And so I was just looking too where his office address was too while we were talking. Because I find that interesting.
Well, I think his office was somewhere else, but I think he had access to the Office of Academic Engagement. If I was him, I wouldn't be looking for Bryan. I wouldn't be, if I was committing a crime like this, I wouldn't be planning it at my office either, off of my office Wi-Fi. I would be going to a place where I know that it was open to the public, or it could have been anybody that logged into that Wi-Fi.
I want to know what cameras are in that area, that would be able to catch him. But I really like the idea and the theory that you put out, because I always assumed over an hour drive back, it's because he was ditching something, right? Whether he dextered his car or he had his coveralls on or he was discarding something, and that is what is accounting for that additional time. But going in that deeper idea of, or he knew this is the amount of time that it would take for me to get back, leaving that extra time when you wouldn't expect to see me get back. I never thought of it from that aspect, and that really is interesting to me, and I really like that.
Yeah, and when you look at it from that perspective, it really does also kind of point towards Kohberger. You're looking at it from the perspective like, who we're talking about. We're talking about a guy who has a master's degree in criminology, one of only 2 students that was recommended through the PhD class or program for criminology. That must mean that he has some sort of intelligence
Right.
and understanding of criminal procedure and law procedure and investigating crime. And he would be highly aware of how an officer or a detective would go about investigating this crime. First you would look for vehicles that match the description and traveling in different areas, and to locate, which direction they're going in, based on common, habit of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's creatures of habit. Typically when somebody commits a crime like this, there's a high sense of stress and anxiety and adrenaline that they're going to be going to one place pretty quickly. And he's aware of that. And that's why I never thought he was like Papa Rogers. He was never inside looking. He was never inserting himself into the case, especially after I also heard the fact that based on his phone data that he never went back to Moscow. One of the biggest tall tales would have been that, hey, this person revisited the crime, on those things, relived it. And it doesn't appear that was the case. And, he's basically doing everything that you would not expect somebody that committed this crime to have done. And I think it's basically because of his knowledge, his beforehand knowledge of how he would have been investigated throughout this entire thing. And, for those that think that maybe, because I thought this too, and I was talking about this with Jaime, I was like, maybe perhaps he planted something that would have pointed in a different direction than himself. He had mentioned he's going to be exonerated and things of that nature. I truly think that if this was Bryan Kohberger, that he was a serial killer in the making. And if this was his first time, if this was his first, I do, based on how fast he was losing his nerve, so to speak. As soon as that DoorDash delivery was picked up and it was go time, his driving became erratic. He was starting to lose control very quickly, and he hadn't even entered the house yet. And so that kind of tells me that, yeah, this was probably his first time.
I think it was his first also.
Yeah. And so it being his first time, I'm not surprised. I mean, a lot of people will say, how stupid is he of driving his own car, leaving the sheath, doing, taking his phone with him, not turning it off. But the thing is, at the end of the day, somebody drove a car out there. Somebody left the sheath behind. Why are we so surprised when police catch a criminal who does so many stupid things?
Well, and that's what I'm always like, if you want me to believe somebody else was involved, all right, well, Anne just denied that there was anybody else in Bryan's car. At least he was driving around alone for this window of time. If there is somebody else, all right, let's say there's another vehicle, right, which we would anticipate if somebody else was involved. We're going to see that on the same footage that picks up suspect vehicle 1's, right? If he's on foot, the perp's on foot, okay, then there were multiple cameras. So as of now, we don't know any of that to exist. So that's why I can't get behind someone else having involvement, just because there's no evidence that points at that we know of currently.
Right. And in reference to this building, as far as cameras, I know you had mentioned that. I didn't see any on the exterior of this building. Doesn't mean that there isn't any in the interior.
Right. I'd like to look into that more.
Right. Around there isn't anything.
Yeah.
There's no cameras now. There's other buildings that have cameras in this area. And the thing is, I think that if there was a camera here and he ended up coming to this area, and this is why I also think that maybe there's a possibility that he came to this area, is because they don't say where he went. They only indicate that he traveled north and then traveled back. And there's no cameras here, so there's a good possibility that this is the area he came in. This building here from WSU that's directly, adjacent or across from Nevada Street. One, it has, camera here from,
nice.
From there, and there are cameras, but they are facing down. Like there's this one, it's facing down, and then on this side there's, where'd I go? Went too far.
I just think in a world full of cameras now, it's really bold to try to commit a crime and think you're going to get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you would think so. You would think so. But I mean, honestly, I think that if this guy didn't leave the sheath behind, they're not catching him.
Really? Do you
Mhm.
think that they caught his license plate on camera even partially?
No.
Nothing at all.
No, I think that the fact that they had to do a genetic tree tells us that they weren't suspecting him, because they wouldn't need to do that if they suspected him. They would have done what they did with the cigarette guy, take his trash from somewhere.
Well, even if they still suspected him, don't you think they couldn't necessarily get his, if he was taking all these precautions, they couldn't get his DNA to compare it to? So do you not think that they would go about testing this DNA alone without using his name? Because then people would say, oh, you built that case around Bryan even more than they do now, versus we're taking the steps to source this DNA all on its own, separate from any license plate or anything like that.
No, because the standardized operation and procedure for the FBI to utilize the genetic tree is only if there is no leads.
Oh,
and all law enforcement, conventional tactics have been exhausted. So the fact that they did it leads me to believe that they had no leads whatsoever. If they had Bryan Kohberger, they had a partial license plate, I think that would be enough to look at him, and they wouldn't have needed any of the information that they had to get the warrants that they got for him, and all that would have been done. But the biggest indication as well is if you suspected this man of being a quadruple homicide suspect, wouldn't you keep your eye on him?
You would think so. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have issues with him even going back to work with students. The risk was so high.
Well, why would law enforcement be confused as to if the Eugene, Oregon Elantra on December 19th was possibly Kohberger's when he was in the Poconos, if they had eyes on him?
That's a great point.
Because according to the Howard Bloom article, December 19th, Chief Fry has what they describe as a pregnant smile. He calls in his chaplain, he calls in his lieutenant, and he says, be ready and be prepared. We might have some news. According to the New York Times article, December 19th is the same day that the genetic tree is completed with the name Bryan Kohberger is given to the city of Moscow. Now, that vehicle that was crashed out there in Eugene, which in the Howard Bloom article indicates that that's why Chief was ecstatic, there was the vehicle in Eugene. December 19th is when I believe the Moscow Police Department puts out a press conference, or a presser, on their website that says that they're aware of the vehicle in Eugene. December 20th, they say that vehicle is not involved. Now, how could they have cleared it so quickly without having gone out there? Well, I'm pretty sure they called the law enforcement agency there, asked for the VIN number. When it came back to somebody else other than Bryan Kohberger, it wasn't their vehicle, because they already had known it was Bryan Kohberger. But if they had, because of the genetic tree, but if they had known it was Bryan Kohberger prior to that, they would have known that on December 13th that he left to the Pocono Mountains, and that vehicle in Eugene was not his. So the fact that they didn't know, and they had to go find his license plate reader, that his phone went through Colorado, and then they had to find out that Indiana pulled him over twice, and that he went back home to the Poconos. And that tells me that they had no idea that Bryan Kohberger was suspect number one. He wasn't until December 19th, in my opinion.
Do you think the stops were planned?
No, not at all. When you look at the demeanor of those officers when they approached the vehicle, it wasn't one that you would suspect be from an officer who knows that is a quadruple homicide suspect. You don't walk up and just kind of nonchalantly lean into the car with your hands, not at least at your gun side, and if other agencies didn't tell you, like, for instance, if I was that officer and somebody said, hey, pull this vehicle over, I just want to see who's driving it, and then I find out later that was a quadruple homicide suspect, that he doesn't know that the reason you're stopping him is just to check him out. To Bryan Kohberger, if he did commit this crime and he's getting pulled over because they've caught him. Right? You don't know how he's going to react.
Right.
And so, You could be going into a situation where this guy turns around, doesn't want to go to jail, maybe has a weapon on him, and you just set an officer to go get ambushed. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So, there is such a thing as professional courtesy, and I don't foresee a law enforcement agency not informing another law enforcement agency that the person they're going to knock down is a quadruple homicide suspect. It just does not make sense to me, and their demeanor doesn't make sense. It doesn't imply that they knew either.
So just complete coincidence that twice he was pulled over like that.
Well, apparently he gets pulled over quite a bit.
That's true. In that short period of time, he did.
It's a knack that he has, is getting pulled over. So,
it's funny.
You would think, and thank you, Patty Nielsen, for your $5 super chat. We appreciate that. But we're past the 10 p.m. hour. It's usually a little bit longer than what we go. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Go ahead, Shay. Do you have anything?
Well, so after this alibi stuff came out, where do you think this leads? Where do you think the roads lead to next in the hearing?
The firing squad. I'm just kidding. I mean, it's a weak alibi. But I think that's the only alibi that you can give, because if he were to say, I was driving around and I went through Coeur d'Alene. Well, Coeur d'Alene has cameras, right? There would be images of him traveling through town or something like that. And if he says, hey, I drove through Coeur d'Alene, after, I left my house at some point, it doesn't matter at what point of the night, just at some point. Well, law enforcement would go back and look at from the hours of probably 2:30 before he left to about 6 o'clock, 30 minutes after he got home, to see if there's a white vehicle without a front license plate that matches the description of Bryan Kohberger's vehicle entering Coeur d'Alene at any point. And if it doesn't, then he's lying about his alibi and his whereabouts. And so if his true whereabouts was, 1122 King Road, he's not going to be able to say anything, because I'm fairly positive there's going to be some sort of evidence of him traveling to those areas, which is why he left it so vague.
Yeah, I guess what I have a hard time with is given the alibi and them saying he was nowhere near the area, then I'm stuck with, then how did his DNA get on the sheath inside the house? Because I know that people can argue a case of your DNA being all around a house, but inside where the crime scene is extremely rare. Yeah. And I feel like the back's against the wall on this at this point, from what I can tell that we've been provided information.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the defense, if they're using freaking case law from 1887 and they're trying to say that Bryan Kohberger was alone that night, this thing's kind of stacking up in one way. They're throwing mud. That's what it looks like. It looks like to me that the defense is just throwing mud and hoping something sticks. I'm waiting for trial to give my full conclusion on my opinion on it. But like I said, I feel very strongly that this person has committed this crime. Just like it's not as strong as Rex Huberman. I'm not afraid to say that guy hasn't gone to jail. And I'll say that I think that dude's 100% guilty of a lot of crap. Especially 3 of those crimes that he's being accused of. I don't know about all 12 of the victims or any of those things, but the ones that have his DNA or his wife's DNA involved in it, I do. I strongly believe that that's the case, which is why I often question is if I feel so strongly of his guilt, do I really think he's going to get a fair trial? I don't know. But that's the double-edged sword you play with.
Yeah.
What else do you got?
Your turn, MJ.
Oh, I've got a million questions, but I'm just trying to prioritize them. If it comes out that this is the single source of male DNA in the sheath is the only DNA that they have of Bryan's at that home, or none of the victims in anything of Bryan's, do you think that's going to be enough, along with the car, let's say that they prove that that suspect vehicle, one, they can't prove that he entered the house other than the DNA on the sheath, but they can prove that's his vehicle in the maneuvers, and then the phone disconnecting from the network. Do you think basically if everything we have now is what we have, will it be enough to convict him?
No. There's so much people out there that think that he's innocent based on the information that is out there now. I think that in a jury of 12, you're going to find at least one person that's going to look at this from that perspective and not be comfortable with it. I think there has to be more than what they have. And I think that, law enforcement was banking on it. When you look at the search warrants and you look at the wording behind them, planning, meticulous planning was involved, things of that nature are being said. They're expecting to find planning of routes, pictures of interior of the house, things like that, because they felt that this crime was well planned and orchestrated. I feel like there should be something else there. Now, like I said before, I think that this guy gets away with this if it's not for that sheath. I think it's going to be hard to prosecute him if there's nothing else. I really do. And like I said, there's so many people that are out there right now that think he's possibly innocent or somebody else is involved or it's not strong enough to put him to death. I think there's a world where a juror can find this man not guilty.
I got stressed thinking about it. The PCA is only supposed to be a very small portion of what they have. So I'm really curious to find out everything. And I really hope CAST comes through. I'd like to educate myself a little bit more because I know that they're able to triangulate and figure out within feet of where a phone is. We've seen it with Alex Cox and with the Vallow case. They were able to determine exactly where those children were buried based on Alex Cox phone pings. But what I'm curious to know is, could they determine that if a phone is disconnected from the network? Are they able to figure out precisely where it was? So I'm curious to know about that.
I'll say this. I highly doubt it, because if it was, putting Bryan Kohberger at the scene would be huge. That would definitely be at the probable cause affidavit that he was there at the scene. That's why I said that if he was the DoorDasher or ordered the DoorDash, that puts him on the scene. And that would be massive, massive. I want to say thank you, Doc Terry, for your $19.99 super chat. Says great panel. Thank you. To me, what was your question again? I'm sorry, I got confused or distracted.
I don't remember
your last statement. You don't remember your last statement?
Well, I got distracted with you. Shay, what was my question? Oh, I was curious about the CAST, if they could triangulate.
So, the way the CAST works, Christy actually sent me an article. The reason why it's precise is that it uses historical data, so it's not triangulation. It uses historical data from the phone, and basically what's going on is a signal is being sent to the phone from the tower, and what the CAST does is it's able to determine the length of time it takes from that signal to get to the phone, then to get back to the tower. That plus triangulation and other things is what determines the precise location. And so in the probable cause affidavit, it states that Bryan Kohberger connected to a tower in Moscow, which I think is important. A lot of people are confusing that with him pinging or being located in Moscow. That's not what it says. It says that he connected to a tower in Moscow, but they don't believe that he was in there. And I think the reason why they don't believe that he was in Moscow is because they were able to determine the length of time that it took from the signal to get from the tower to his phone and back was longer than it would have been had he been in Moscow. And it probably gave some kind of precise location somewhere else.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Some of the things that are worded in this probable cause affidavit are just poorly written, but everything is in there. I'll say that everything's in there. You just sometimes, I've had to read it like 6 times to kind of understand some of it, because there's after the first reading, I was like, why the hell is half of this even in here? And then the more I've dug into it and read it multiple times, I'm starting to figure out what they're trying to say. But to me, it was very much written like a copy and paste type of situation as it went along. They were writing reports as they went along, and they went back to their old reports and copied and pasted the pertinent information, and maybe left some things that probably shouldn't even have been in there, but they did. And That's kind of the way I felt about this probable cause affidavit.
No, that makes I agree. And with like Ann Taylor, because Amber had said it on her panel, because of the strict gag order, usually what you would anticipate in cases like this is seeing the defense lawyer speak out on behalf of their client, right? And start poking holes right along as we're leading up to trial. We don't have that in this circumstance because there's such a tight gag order. But Ann Taylor is kind of doing exactly that, just speaking through the motions, right? She's creating that reasonable doubt, and she's using those very interesting word choices, like the sheath was placed. Like everybody ran with that's planted. That's not what she said. Place can be true even if it was Bryan, right? And the unknown sources of male DNA, like very, total lack of DNA. And so she's still kind of controlling the narrative through these documents, and that's really interesting. And that's what she's supposed to do. And I just wish people would realize, because people are like, well, she can't lie. I'm not saying she's lying, but she's being very wise with how she chooses to say things. And they could be true. They could be, they have little loopholes that they could go through where total lack of DNA, again, is that synonymous with absolutely none, or is lacking insufficient? Because that's what the definition is of lacking. But it's that total that people get hung up on. And I really don't know if it means none whatsoever. But that could mean as far as she knows with what she was given at the time that the document was written or something like that. So, but it does seem like she is speaking to the public through these motions.
Oh, she definitely is. There's a clear example of it. And it talks about the fact that you brought it up, the undisclosed or unidentified DNA. Well, if you read that document, it says as of December 17th that there was unidentified DNA in that around where the bodies were. As of December 17th, Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the sheath was also unidentified. So I think it's a play on words. Because it wasn't until December 19th, it wasn't until December 19th that they found it. So December 17th, they didn't know who Bryan Kohberger was either. So there's no indication, and we're not going to find out, not now at least, how far or how extensive other suspects were investigated. Now, we know other suspects were investigated because law enforcement here took a cigarette bud secretly. So somebody else was investigated.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the Richard Allen case, we know that Ronald Logan was heavily suspected. We know that Tony Klein was heavily suspected. Neither one of those guys come out in the paperwork that we're privileged to see, but I guarantee you I know where it's at. It's in discovery, but we're not privileged to the discovery. And I guarantee you those suspect information and stuff like that is within that 51 terabytes of discovery that the prosecution has handed over to the defense here as well. And Absolutely. So we're just not privileged to it. And some folks are running with that as because we don't know that it doesn't exist. And that's not true.
Right. 100%. Very much agree.
And so, yeah, I've gone through this case back and forth quite a bit. I know the ins and outs of it very well. So when it comes, when I read all these things about it, and I read the tactics that they're using, there's a lot of it. But I think it's starting to backfire because it's starting to get thin. When you're starting to go down, 1887 code and, Kohberger's alibi, things like that. Like I said, it really does look like mud's being thrown at the wall at this point.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like.
I hope that we get to the point where, it's apparent that they've exhausted all tips. There's no room open for discussion that somebody wasn't investigated properly, that they have their right guy. Because, I don't think any of us want, somebody to have a wrongful conviction, but most importantly, I want justice for the victims, and I feel like that's what's getting lost in some of this is the justice for the victims.
100%. A lot of people will look at the fact that so many cases go unsolved and confuse that with the possibility that the police got this wrong. they'll look at the percentage of things like, oh yeah, like 50% of murder cases don't get solved. That doesn't mean that those that do, those people are wrongly convicted. It's even smaller amount. Does it happen? Yes.
Yep.
Are there bad officers just like there's bad everything else in this world? Yeah. Obviously. Nobody's perfect. Everybody, no system is perfect. The judicial system isn't perfect. And so, but I would tend to believe that the judicial system from the United States of America is probably the most trustworthy ish. Maybe not recently, the higher up you go, the higher in position certain people are, and maybe the law doesn't acquire or have the same effect. But for the most part, I would feel like on everyday normal persons that the judicial system is probably the most fairest that is out there, in the world. Like I said, there's no perfect system, but in this scenario, I just don't see how things can happen. Even if, all right, let's just say that something, like they said that they were going to plant something, right? In order for this to be a frame, officers would have had to have known that Bryan Kohberger was going to be out that night, have his phone out that night, and have a sheath with his DNA ready to go the next morning when this thing happened. I mean, in order for all that to happen, the officers would have had to have been involved, which I'm not even going to start that rumor. It doesn't make any sense. Even if it was like, all right, law enforcement needed to come up with some sort of, fall guy. Bryan Kohberger is probably the worst fall guy you can go after.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, you're right. And I say that all the time because people are like, all right, his DNA could have gotten that sheath prior to the murders. And I think there's a good chance it did. I think it may have gotten on there before he ever went to the house. Right. But people are like, like he could have touched it at a garage sale. And it's like, okay, if you want to think that DNA got there, then his car shouldn't be there. His phone shouldn't be doing these things that are perfectly in sync with the time of the murders, right? That's why you got to look at everything collectively. It's when you look at everything combined that it really paints a bigger picture. But people are like, oh, he went for a drive at night. I didn't know going for a drive at night meant that you'd committed a quadruple homicide. Well, it doesn't, Well, he could have touched the sheath at a garage sale. That's not good enough. Oh, well, he may have shut off his phone because it died. Listen, they'll be able to determine if it was a conscious decision to disconnect from the network, or if it, happened to die or out of service range. They'll be able to determine that. But when you put them all together, it paints a big picture. But people argue a lot, each one independently.
Oh, 100%. I can't stand that. I've asked multiple times for a creator or anybody to put out the entire story of what they think that Bryan Kohberger was doing that night that shows that he's innocent, and in that story be believable. I haven't seen it yet, but let's look at the phone turning off at 2:40 something and then returning back onto the network at 4:48. Sure. What is a logical reasoning if you were Bryan Kohberger's defense team as an explanation for that? And then I'll try to argue that as pretending to be the prosecution.
Are we acknowledging he's on the road and on the move?
He's already acknowledged that.
Okay, touche. Okay. Well, if you were going for the defense, well, the entire point I'm going for a ride is to distract my mind, to get away. I'm overwhelmed. I'm stressed. I manually shut my phone off because I'm trying to disconnect. I'm trying to just get out of my own head. But that's why it's like they'll be able to determine whether it was a conscious thing, or you could turn around and say that I lost service. I have no idea what you're talking about. Neither is a good defense, but I don't see many options that they have.
So if the defense was that he turned it off to clear his mind, what would be the reasoning that you think that he turns it on at 4:48? Is it because he's lost?
Well, I was about to say, it depends on where he was on the map. Could he pull off that he was lost? Could he pull off that he wanted to check in and make sure that there was no family emergencies or anything like that? It's not good to leave it off for an extended period of time. There's so many factors.
So for me, if he got lost, the reason that doesn't make sense is because he doesn't go back home, the faster way, or the traditional way. He goes this weird ass loop that I don't think any GPS is going to tell him to go.
Well, if it was a weird ass loop, maybe he could pull it off. Like, I don't know, man. I keep going around this damn loop. I needed to turn it on to use my GPS. But all of that would be proven, right? When you
Right.
manually
What I'm
turn it
saying
on.
is, if you turn on your GPS right now, right, you're lost. You've been out there for 2.5 hours already. At this point, you turn on your phone. You're near Blaine, Idaho. I give them the benefit of the doubt. It's dark. It's rural area. No light pollution. Everything looks the same. All right. You turn on your phone. Your phone tells you, all right, Brian, turn around and go back towards Moscow, and then cut back over here off of 270, and you'll be home in about 30 minutes. I don't think there's a, MapQuest or Google or whatever is going to say, all right, Brian, let's head south further towards Genesee, and then let's head towards Unionton, and then go up towards Pullman and get there at 5:30. I don't think that that's even a route that's recommended because of how out of the way it is.
Mm-hmm. So that would be the best defense.
Right. So I'm just thinking to myself, like, if he tried to say that, and the other thing is, if he tried to say, all right, I lost signal, I don't think that losing signal in the city where signal's probably the strongest makes sense, but yet it comes back after going through possibly Moscow. I don't know how you can get to this area without going through Moscow, but let's just say there is. Either way, he ends up over here in this rural area where signal's probably not that strong, but that's where it comes back. That doesn't make sense for me either.
The only way you could pull it off is they'll be able to determine, like I said, if it was a conscious decision to manually disconnect from the network. And the only thing you could do is turn around and say, I was disconnecting, period. The entire point I'm going for a drive is because I have a lot on my mind. And after a period of time, I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to check in. God forbid there's an emergency or whatever. But yeah, that's the only thing I could see. Because what defense can you think? And that's why it's so important to establish a pattern of behavior, though, because in this alibi document, it's saying that it wasn't unusual for Bryan to go for these long drives at night. They're already accounting for those 12 times he would have been in that same area, and they're trying to jump ahead and control that narrative. But was it unusual for his phone to disconnect from the network? Because if you're going to claim that, I'm doing this to, clear my head, well, then why wouldn't any of the other 12 times prior was your phone disconnecting? Now, we don't know if maybe it did. I don't know, but that's why a pattern of behavior is so important to show how this night was unique compared to all the other nights.
100%. Now, I would strongly suspect that prior to the incident that the phone wasn't being off. The reason being is that the phone wasn't off when he was apparently doing his stalking. So I wouldn't think that his phone will be off in these areas. And if it is, it comes back that it is. Do you think that that's a problem?
If his phone is determined to have been manually shut off during those times?
That there is a habit of him turning it off throughout certain parts of the day for, let's just say it's a 2-week period. All of a sudden, for the last 2 weeks, at least 5 different occasions he's gone on a long drive and the phone's been turned off.
If it was the 2 weeks prior to the murders leading up, not so much, because I'm sure they're going to go with premeditation. But if it was something over the course of months, I think that could pose an issue. Yeah.
Now, the other thing is that we don't know is, outside of the second time that Bryan Kohberger was out there on the 13th, I believe, where he's also seen, getting a cup of coffee, and then he's in an Albertson. I don't think there's anything that indicates that he ever did that again.
Exactly. If it was so normal, why did he stop? Why didn't he return back? Right.
Exactly. And it doesn't seem like he stopped going to Moscow for the next month, in a place that all indications showed up until the crime he was visiting quite often. So I think that that's a change of behavior, is if he was visiting Moscow often, and then the last time that he goes out there is the morning prior to the bodies being discovered, or prior to 911 being called. I think that's a change of behavior of him stopping.
Correct.
So. Well, I'd even like to point something out, that when you're talking about the phone stopping, joining to the network, if somebody wants a break from something, I don't know what kind of phone he had, but like for an iPhone, like specifically, I wouldn't even have to put it in airplane mode. I could just put it in do not disturb or some kind of special focus mode. So those are just other things that I was thinking of as well. And if he was needing the phone to perhaps navigate himself back, then they would be able to tell that through the maps data. Also, if and when like his phone stopped reporting to the network, what power of level of power his battery was on. So I mean, even if the chances that his phone died, that might even be rolled out quickly too. We just don't know yet.
That's true. That's true. You know, if he has an iPhone, I think they're going to be able to determine the life of his battery based on the timing of when this phone went off.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to definitely be an indicator, in my opinion, as well. And I think the cards are stacked up against Kohberger, to be honest with you. You know, I know that he came out saying that he's looking forward to being exonerated. I don't think that's going to be the case. You know, I think that I think justice is going to be served and it'll be swift in this case. I don't think this. I really don't. I don't. You know, unless they don't find anything else. Like if the probable cause affidavit is the only thing that we have, then yeah, that's going to be a big issue. But if he committed this crime, I find it very difficult that they find zero evidence after his arrest.
I think they're going to have much more than we realize. I think that people are underestimating just how many expert witnesses are going to get up there and how many people are going to testify and how down to the science they're going to have this. But at the same time, I think that defense is going to pull something out that's going to shock all of us. And it doesn't necessarily have to exonerate Bryan. I think it's always going to be Bryan, but it's going to be something enough for us to be like, and looking in another direction. I just don't know what it is.
Well, Bryan Kohberger had mentioned that he had thought this was a crime of passion early on in this investigation. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a narrative that they continue to go with. You know, given the fact that it was rumored that Kaylee had, you know, majority of the severe wounds. To my understanding, she was the one that was out of a recent relationship. You know, that night she was at the corner club with her ex-boyfriend. They were on the phone that entire night. He lives literally a couple of blocks away. During their time that they had broken up, she went on a date with another person. You know, she was leaving and moving away, was with this guy since he was 15 years old. And, you know, her first love. And because she's moving away, she decides that she can't date him anymore, but can date other guys. I think, you know, the defense is going to look at that situation and try to build some sort of defense for Bryan Kohberger and saying, you know, a knife is a very personal weapon. That's something that, you know, you would assume somebody that had a lot of feelings and emotional ties to this case would have used. And so, you know, I think that could be what an angle that they're going to go with. And, you know, I don't necessarily think, I honestly, truly don't think that Jack is involved. I felt that if he was, given, you know, if it was him and it was a crime of passion, those things aren't planned out very well. You know, those things are very emotional, you know, crime of passion type of cases, and tons of evidence are left behind. And usually people are caught with those type of crimes. The fact that it went so long that it did told me that it wasn't going to be that situation here.
I always say be prepared for the unexpected. Like I watched all of the Murdaugh trial and I was floored when they had the Snapchat video of Buster's. I was floored when they had the GM auto tech there discussing like everything with the car. Like I think we got to be open-minded. But, you know, if it isn't Bryan, of course, I don't want him on, you know, up there facing this. But as far as I know, it seems plausible from the PCA. And I'm really curious what comes back from some of those social media warrants, because that tends to be like a real heavy hitter in how much we've seen pulled and sealed.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. So I got one last question for you guys, and then we're going to call it a show. My question is, if you were the prosecutor and the defense team came forward and said that they're willing to plea out in exchange for the motive, the why, trial similar to BTK, where he gave all of the details as to the crime. Would you take that deal to take the death penalty off in exchange for the motive and why? We'll start off with you, Melissa.
It would be solely based on what the families wanted.
Mm-hmm. That's a good. That's a good answer.
Yeah, it would be. See, like with the Watts case, the Rucheks wanted death penalty off. You know, like let him take the deal, plea out. Like they didn't. Yeah, it would be the family. Whatever would bring them the most form of closure. If getting the answers in exchange for the plea. Because I'm a big person on answers. I think that you can't really rest in peace or get justice until you know what truly happened. So if someone would be, but you also have to put that level of trust in that what they're telling you is accurate, you know? But it would be, yeah, based on what the family would want.
And what about you, Shay? You know, and let's just say that the family was split and it was your decision.
Oh.
He threw you a curveball.
You said like there's a plea with this, or
yeah, the deal is you either go to trial and there's a possibility that he gets off on this, or you know, but if found guilty, there's a good chance he's gonna face the full justice, or take a plea and he gives you the motive, tells you why and all the details, similar to BTK in his trial, where everything was disclosed.
That's tough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. So if you plead, would it be like a normal plea or like an Alfred plea where you say there's enough evidence against me? Because that's also kind of what sticks in my mind. And they don't serve near as long in prison.
Nah, it is life without parole.
Life without parole.
Yeah, he's the only thing getting taken off is his life.
I'd say that's fine, but no appeals to that. Like, I think there has to be conditions.
100%.
So
100%.
I mean, I wouldn't like enforce the death penalty if he's going to plead, but I'd say no appeals to it and it sticks. You know, I think one of the reasons, and I understand that appeals happen in a death penalty case as well, but I think that, you know, for some people, their belief is an eye for an eye, and that's where they feel like true justice is served. And I'm not going to lie, I feel that in many situations, you know. But when you have multiple families involved and they may have different morality, like a different morality perspective around it, I would probably go for the lesser and not put the death penalty on there and just do life without parole.
Yeah.
I feel like that would probably be most respectable at that time, you know?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think I'm in the same boat. I think, you know, obviously I'd ask the victims, and if the victims came forward and said, you know, Daniel, two families were like, yeah, we want to do it. Two families said, no, we want an eye for an eye. You know, depending on the strength of the case as well, because some justice is better than no justice.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, those things are all taken into consideration. You know, the hard part is like saying, hey, man, we got this guy dead to rights. There's no way he's going to win this case. You know, now it's like we either go for his life or we give him the option of living his rest of his life in jail. And we know, at least in part, because who's to say what he's saying is honest too? You know, we get some sort of story coming from the suspect. And so, yeah, it's a very difficult decision, but, you know, I think that's one that should be carefully considered, in my opinion, if it gets to that point, or if it comes down to he gets found guilty and they want to, you know, do the, you know, let's just say he's found guilty and at time of sentencing, he comes up with saying, hey, I'm willing to do this if you take that off. You know, I think that that's something to discuss at that point. We have a couple of super chats real quick. Eric Schultz coming with a $5 super chat saying, thank you, Blue, Daniel, and Jaime, great guest, and all in chat. And then we have True Crime Cafe with Diego coming with a $2 super chat as well, saying great chat as well. Perfect. For some reason, my StreamYard's not working, or I'd pull them up, y'all. I apologize for all the problems we've had. For those who aren't aware or don't know, I'm sure many of you guys, hold on, stop sharing, and then my StreamYard is acting up so bad.
Yeah, it's frozen for me. It's been frozen this entire time.
Yeah. So
I
this
had to
is
get off my computer because mine was messing up.
Yeah, it's horrible. So this is Melissa Jade's YouTube channel. She has 7.4K subs. Let's get her up to 7.5, not to 8K. Links are in the description. Do y'all have any final words before we let everybody go?
No, just thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, and I appreciate hearing your feedback, your experience, your theories. So I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you, Shay?
And ditto. I do appreciate talking with you guys. It's always enjoyable, and I love to theorize and go based on fact, but I also like my conspiracy side too. So this has been an interesting case, and I appreciate the chat for being kind as well.
100%. Thank you guys. Thank you, mods, for being awesome in there. Thank you, anybody that has super chat or donated or supported the channel, commented, and subscribed. Thank you guys. I'm gonna leave you guys, if you guys don't mind waiting. I do have a little commercial at the end that we show, but afterwards I'll continue to talk after the show is over. So sure. For everybody else, here's the raffle information that we have going on. This is our little Frenchie Nelson. Nelson was the runt of his litter. And unfortunately, he is diagnosed with IVDD, which resulted in him losing the ability to move his rear legs. Now, we were left with a couple of options, one being put Nelson down, or two, go through a costly surgery, which wasn't guaranteed to work. We gave Nelson that chance, and we went through the surgery. And fortunately, today he can walk, and he's not 100%, but he's getting there. Through rehab and continual rehab, we think he may. Those bills are extensive and continuous. In efforts to lower that financial strain, we've decided to do a raffle. This raffle is going to be of a 4x3 handmade quilt. This quilt was actually made by my mother-in-law. And so high quality, I think you'll love it. It's a rescue themed quilt. So how do you enter? There is a $5 entry to get into the raffle. All entries will be through Cash App, $ Drunk Turkey Show to enter. In the description, make sure you put your shipping address and your name. If you want to put in multiple, you can do so. You can send in, for instance, 25 and also put in the description 5 entries. The raffle will be on August 28th. The winner will be chosen at random by a wheel selector. Don't need to be present on the live. Good luck and thank you.